Okay. Do you remember Riley Grace Rochon? Do any of you know Riley Grace Rochon? Are any of you familiar with the name Riley Grace Rochon? I guess I should start with this. Yes? The food, yes. Okay. Are any of you familiar with the a person called ContraPoints? I'm gonna do another Kinked Pride flashbacks. Uh, hell yeah. Heck no. Heard of them. No, it's not like ContraPoints, no. 3 votes for yes. Because there's a brand new interview. There's a brand new interview that RGR had with Contra. So we can watch this next if you wish. We can watch this. So let's go. Let's do this. Okay, it seems like it's a popular topic. Okay, I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna react. I'll do a react. More people should vote. 9 people in the chat. 4 people voting. Come on. Come on. Oh, come on. Five. Okay, it's very clearly people want me to do this. So let's do this. Let's jump right into it. I was wondering if people would want to see this. Okay, let's do this. Let's good opportunity to see uh, what's happening with the RGR relaunch, so to speak. All right. Let's see how this goes. It's 2 hours long, so this might be the last thing for us today, since I'll be adding rich commentary as always. So this might be like, I don't know how many hours this will end up being. We'll see. We will see how long this one will end up being. We'll see, we'll see, we'll see. Is RGR trying to get back into online discourse? Sort of, kind of. More like doing content about doing real life politics and getting activated in real life politics, getting more involved in real life. That's basically the direction now. Getting involved in real life politics, kind of thing. Getting people more involved.
Thank you for joining us. I'm joined today by Natalie Wynn, the creator of the ContraPoints YouTube channel. But Natalie, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone who's watching?
Sure.
I feel like it's a bit quiet.
I am Natalie Wynn.
Is it quiet? Is the video quiet or is it fine on your end? My end, it feels like it could be a bit quiet, but tell me if it's okay. It sounds fine? That's good.
Like Riley said, the creator of the YouTube channel ContraPoints, a channel about politics.
Although the audio quality is not the best, maybe. I'm not sure why that is. If it's the microphones or if it's, well, whatever. Beggars can't be choosers. The most important thing is not for the audio quality to be top tier. It's for the conversation to be top tier.
Philosophy and sexuality, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Or sorry, if there's anything else you wanted to say.
Oh, I feel like I got it all out.
So I am super happy to be able to talk to you. So a big reason I want to talk to you, among many, is because I'm really interested in the role and the impact that you've played in the online political space, because part of the project that I'm doing with some of the work I've done recently and people who I'm...
So I guess what is being sort of talked about here is progressive victory. Just get this out of the way. What she's talking about is progressive victory.
Talking to is trying to figure out, especially with like the 2024 election on the horizon, how we can use some of the energy in this online political space to try and make some kind of positive impact in the real world. And a big reason why I really respect you is because I think that you've done a really good job of being able to have really nuanced and meaningful and insightful conversations on very charged political topics and achieve like a really substantial degree of success. And I don't really see many other people, if very few at all, who have been able to achieve anything like that. Especially...
True. Especially me. I'm especially small and unsuccessful. It's okay. I'm growing. I'm still growing.
You know, as a woman, someone who's queer in this online space, like there's so much to be...
I'm all of these things. Oh my gosh. This interview was initiated by Riley Grace Rochon.
You know, impressed by. So yeah, I don't know. Like there's a lot of different places I want to explore, but I just think that you're someone who contributes a lot to the space.
Thank you. Well, if the question is how do you do that, how do you reach people while also making...
I'm not sure. Part of me expects the answer to be I don't know.
content. I think it's a balance of being aware that when you're a content creator, you are in the entertainment industry. That's
Sure.
the space that you are.
That's true. Do I entertain you all? Write yes or no in the chat. Are you entertained?
Are in. So you do have to be entertaining, right? People generally do not watch for very long if you are boring. So you have to be...
Oh my god. Damn. I feel self-conscious. I'm starting to feel self-conscious. Am I boring? No. Okay. Enough. Enough. Yep, I'm boring. Yep. Oh gosh. Well, at least you're being honest. At least you're being honest, Kiskara.
Entertaining, and that's a set of skills that's kind of alarmingly different from the set of skills of, I don't know, rationally analyzing arguments or doing research or having some kind of a moral backbone of some kind, right? So unfortunately, a lot of people who venture into politics in influencer spaces are people who probably should not be doing that.
Okay.
So, but I also think that, you know, a lot of people who want to do politics online.
True. Maybe. Or who am I to talk? I'm so small.
You know, run into a few difficulties. One is that they're writing academic essays and reading them to a camera. That's not entertaining.
I'm not reading academic, although I did say that I will want to go through research, so.
So the audience doesn't come.
Oh no! I'm being explained as to why the audience doesn't come to me. Damn, I must take notes.
But the other problem is that you can kind of get addicted. Has tended to be more my problem. You can kind of get addicted to
the entertainment,
the egotistical rush of being a internet like micro celebrity, right? And then you kind of, I feel like I've seen, I won't name names. I feel like I've seen multiple people in the space kind of like.
I now I want her to name names. Now I want to see the names. Now I want the names to be named.
Lose their any kind of like moral or like legitimate like political thoughtfulness that their content had is lost as they get addicted to views or as they get addicted to attention, and they kind of shift their content towards
drama, like Child Logic did. I'm gonna name names.
Basically, you know, they read what the algorithm tells them as feedback, and then that becomes the driving force of what motivates their channel. I think that's bad. So you have to like, again, find some kind of balance.
Although there's a big difference between being a video essayist and being a streamer. Like we do have to recognize that as well. Like there's a big difference between performing to a live audience and creating entertainment in a pre-made format where you have months to work on a script, create a set, create a setting, blah blah blah, you know? There's a little bit of a difference there.
Between the need to be entertaining, but also like the need to step back from the.
Essayists refuse to acknowledge that. I mean, there is a difference. And I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other. There's just a difference in the production and how you need to act, what you need to do, etc. when you do things live and when you do, you know. It's like it's basically like the difference between performing on a stage as an actor and and sort of performing on a stage and improvising everything. You know?
Numbers and question why you're doing this every once in a while, because you can definitely get lost in the role of being a political entertainer to the expense of the message.
Yeah, gosh, there's so many things I want to explore there because I really like.
I mean, there's a balance to be struck there. You sort of want to keep the message, but you sort of want to package it in a way that people will want to see, that people will want to, you know, you feel like they're enjoying what they're seeing while getting the important information. That's basically the gist of it. Sort of theater versus actor in a movie, but theater still has this rehearsed element to it, right? And live streaming has this more of a very, it's happening like right now. It's like live. It's like you don't rehearse streams beforehand and just enact them in front of a live audience. You know, there's a lot of improvisation when it comes to live streaming. So it's like a little bit different from theater as well. You know, because you don't just enact a role that you've rehearsed many times on the stream. You have to, for one, even if you did, you still have to interact with the chat in a live sort of way, unless you just ignore your chat completely and just do what you rehearsed. If something goes sideways on a stage, you have to adapt. That is true. That is true. That is true.
The advice to be able to give to people who want to get more involved in politics, because something that I've observed, kind of like what you were talking about, right? How people can get sort of lost in the sauce or lost in like following the algorithm, is there's a lot of people who see content creators like yourself who create something really impactful and something really meaningful, and they try to emulate that, and they end up either getting sidetracked, or they don't know like what really makes it meaningful, or like what makes what you do really tick, right? Like what makes you ContraPoints, and not somebody else. And people end up
What makes me Lucy? What makes me Lucy Hazeh and not somebody else? That is the question.
getting sidetracked, or they get, they focus on like internet drama, or they focus on, like there's a bajillion different ways that I see people getting kind of whisked away.
I mean, to be fair, ContraPoints has also sort of dabbed into drama when in the middle of a video essay, she inserted a whole little mini part about Vosh, which, in my opinion, sort of lessened the whole thing. I'm noticing all of you nonstop. That is the biggest boon of watching my streams. I notice all of my viewers.
So I guess that one question.
Sorry, I feel like what you're describing is like all creators begin by imitating someone, but if your content is just imitative,
I'm not sure if I've imitated anybody. Does it feel like I'm imitating anybody? Who am I imitating? Write the name of the streamer that you believe I'm imitating. Now that is interesting. Now that is a very interesting bit. Write the name of the streamer that you think I'm imitating. Go. Go, go, go. I want to see names in the chat of people that I'm imitating. I want to see what your opinion on this is. I think that the power of ContraPoints video essays is that they age well. And I think that the universality of the topics sort of makes it that you can watch a video essay from ContraPoints, later down the line and still be like, oh yeah, I'm getting something from this. And in that sense, I'm sorry, inserting a bit about Vosh will just make the video essay age badly, in my opinion. Later down the line, once the whole Vosh thing becomes irrelevant, so will the part in the essay, which will make it immediately aged and like a waste of time to watch. Does that make sense? That's why I feel like it was a bad decision to insert that whole part in the essay. Oh. So You don't believe I imitate anybody. Interesting. I thought you would name names. I honestly thought you would name some names that I imitate. But it seems not. Now I'm gonna use this opportunity to beg you to join the page and help me to fund my next trip to Ukraine, which will be very soon. Very soon, very soon, the next trip will be. So I'm counting on all of you, all 12 of you, to help me. By the way, let's continue.
We'll notice that. And it's kind of not appealing, right? Like, you're never going to be better at making ContraPoints videos than I am, right? You can probably be way better at a bunch of other things, but not that. So, you know, obviously, like, be yourself is a little bit trite.
But be
and
yourself.
Sometimes you kind of discover what your persona is going to be while you're making content.
Sure.
But be yourself.
Yeah, you cannot go into this with the idea that you're just going to imitate someone else. What people will be attracted to in your content is
you.
what you.
That's right. You're very unique, Lucy. I am? Wait, what is so unique about me?
Uniquely are bringing to it. So that's the limit of imitation.
So what would you say, because this is something I think about a lot,
Oh my gosh.
and I really like the observation that you made that, like, you don't want to, like, a lot of people start off by, like, taking inspiration or imitating other people who are more successful. I think that's...
Literally everyone knows Vaush. It's not about it being... I don't think you understand my point. I don't think you understood my point. It's not about people knowing Vosh. It's about the thing that is being talked about Vosh not really being relevant anymore or important. That's what I'm referring to. You know? In a few years, nobody will care about, oh my gosh, Vosh this, Vosh that in an essay. You know? But in a few years, if you construct an essay about a broader point or a broader topic, people can still watch that and say, oh yeah, that topic is still important, still relevant, still, you know. Yeah, nobody will care about a drama specific part of an essay in a few years. It'll just become filler in the thing. So it's not about the segment not being understandable, it's about the thing being relevant to the essay. Well, maybe, but that particular drama will not be forever relevant, is what I'm trying to say, to put across.
It's probably true. But with you, I think a lot of people probably have focused a lot on, like, the aesthetics of what you do, like the bisexual lighting. Some people would even say that you even, like, created, like, a genre of video, the ContraPoint genre. But what would you say in your own words is, like, what really makes what you do unique and special?
Well, I feel like you're asking me a little bit too.
Yes, it is, because it adds nothing, yeah.
To be a narcissist here, but
hey, this is an interview of you. Like, the whole point of this is to, talk about yourself.
Well, I think that it's a question of voice. Like,
bisexual lighting. Listen, if you want me to get bisexual lighting, I need to be able to afford it. So get to lucyhaze.org donate or something. I'm not sure what the link is. The link is above in the chat. And then you can, help me. Oh my gosh, thank you, Adventurous Amish, for the $5. Be safe. Thank you. I will try. Wait, have you been here all this time, Adventurous Amish? But thank you. Thank you so much.
Nice have a voice that is mine
Hmm.
and a style that took years to build. And that's something that if you sort of take creative work seriously, everyone has to do for themselves.
True. I'm trying. I'm trying to build my voice. I'm doing my best.
There's not like I mean, it's true of any kind of creative thing, right? If you're a musician, a lot of your early music that you make is going to sound like the music of musicians that you like. But if anyone's ultimately going to take that much notice of you, you do have to grow past being a cover band. So I think I think that I have a certain way of doing things, and I think my writing probably has a certain.
I do have a certain way of doing things. Although I feel like I'm very inactive on social media. I feel like I should be more active on things like Twitter, etc. Do you not feel that way? What do you think? Should I be more active on Twitter? Promoting stuff?
Style that people pick up on. I feel like YouTubers who I really like and respect, who are good at doing video essays, are all pretty different from each other.
See, it's all about the video essays, and streaming is a little bit different from doing video essays.
And I feel like
I think chronic offlineness is a virtue. It is a virtue, but it does not help me grow. While it is a virtue that is a detriment to the growth of the channel a bit. So I don't know. It's like a trade-off, isn't it?
The best video essay, the best video essayist, like the best any kind of writer. You can look at one paragraph and you can tell who wrote that because it's in their voice.
Okay. So I like this emphasis on voice, and I definitely get that insofar as distinguishing what you do from other video essayists, right?
And I can see that in other types of works of people that I know.
I think of the H-bombs of the world. I know that Lindsay Ellis, I don't know if she's put out stuff recently, but I used to watch a lot of her video essays, and there's other people.
I've heard of some of those, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, here's a good question. So I don't ever like focusing on people, or I don't, unless that's what you want to talk about, people who you don't like. I think that a better question is are there other creators who you see out there who also create video essay content, regardless of if they focus on politics, so that's more where my interest is, where you have a lot of respect for their work and you see them as really good examples that other people should take inspiration from?
Yeah, I do, but do I really have to name a list? I feel like it's just
if you don't want to, that's totally fine.
Because if I start naming the people on YouTube video essays who I think are really good, then the people I don't name will wonder, why didn't I mention them? And
that's fair.
I have my opinions about it.
Maybe a better question would be what are the qualities that you look for that make?
I guess that's a better question.
You really interested or that you think are really impressive for people who make that kind of content?
Okay.
Well, I think that one thing that usually comes across is you can usually tell when someone has made a video because they're passionate about the topic, as opposed to they make the video because they want money and they want to be famous and they want to, you know what I mean? There's something infectious about a person's passion for a subject.
Yeah.
I guess we could talk about individual videos. A video essay that did extremely well in the last few years was Dan Olson's video on NFTs.
Although keep in mind, passion and hard work, because I feel like I have to remind this. I feel like I have to add a little bit of a reminder. Even if you're passionate, even if you produce good work, it does not follow automatically that it will be a success. Okay? A lot of good work that is born out of passion, that is born out of really good work, is not does not get the recognition that it deserves. And that is also a sad reality, you know?
Remember
like,
that.
It's not always a simple formula of, oh, if your thing didn't succeed, then that must mean that it was simply not good enough or you were not passionate about it, you know? You just did it for money.
13, I don't know how many million views. Part of what made that video work is that he seemed not just to be sort of like going through the motions of making a
Also that. Kiskara.
video essay. He seemed like actually to be like emotionally caught into this topic and like frustrated with what was happening and wanting and have he had something to say, I guess,
Sure.
is like the most simple way to put it, right? Have something to say before you talk, I think, is a good piece of advice. You know, it's usually obvious when someone is talking because they have something to say that is like animating them from within, versus someone sitting down to be like, well, we got to pay rent this month, so I guess I'll talk about whatever's trending, right? Like, it's usually pretty easy to tell the difference between those things, and that's a lot of what distinguishes work that's like you want to spend time consuming from work that's easy to pass over.
Would you describe that as like, because I think about this and I think that like a really big quality that you're hitting on is kind of like authentic passion, like being really authentically motivated in something like oh, there's a TikTok account online. This is not political whatsoever, but he shows up on my feed where I think that he's someone in the UK and he just loves trains and he just will make tons and tons of videos like
who doesn't love trains? Am I right?
hyper fixating in on like
I'm gonna go in a train to Lviv.
different trains over in the UK. And I watch this and I'm like, I don't know the first thing about trains, but like, damn,
Or
if I
rather,
don't like
from Lviv to Kiev. I'm gonna go to Lviv. I'm gonna go on a bus, unfortunately. But from Lviv to Kiev, definitely taking a train. Definitely taking a train there with like a sleeping car, maybe even.
these videos because like he likes it, and you know what? There's something cool about that.
Yeah, well, it's again, I think the topic can even be flexible. For my taste, like if someone is passionate about a subject and a good communicator, I will find myself getting interested in what they're saying, regardless of whether I was interested in it before I started the video.
Sure.
So I entered to you've backed me into a corner where I actually have to like name names that I admire. Well, there's a YouTuber, Jenny Nicholson, who has done in the last few years some theme park.
Oh, I know. That is a great creator. Oh my gosh. Her book reviews were so funny. Oh, what was that book review? Trigger warning. I think she reviewed Trigger warning. That creator is really good. Oh my gosh. The book reviews were so good. Oh man. I miss that creator's book reviews.
Reviews that have gotten many millions of views, despite the fact that each one is over 4 hours, which is a massive amount of commitment. I am not someone who's particularly interested in
really good. Really, that creator does really good stuff.
Parks. It's not like a thing that I would usually go out of my way to watch videos about it, but because she's passionate about it, because she obviously cares, because she's an effective communicator, the videos are extremely engaging, and I've watched them all multiple times. So again, you can't be Jenny Nicholson if you're not Jenny Nicholson. You have
True. And the fact that I immediately knew who it was upon hearing the name says something, right?
to find the thing that you are passionate about, right? And something that you can communicate about that effectively. And that's, you know, again, where you have to move beyond imitation at a certain point.
So that makes a lot of sense. And I'm with you. I guess that like, and this to me is where the tension lies for, let's contrast against like the people who are like, oh, I just got to pay rent, right? Because like,
okay,
if you want to
name them, name those people. Don't be cowards. Name the people that just have to pay rent. Name them.
able to do this and do it well, it seems like you have to devote a lot of time and energy and resources to developing, you know, skills like figuring out how to write scripts, how to be able to do research, how to be able to put, like, there's so many different working parts, right?
True.
And that takes way more time and resources, I think, than the average person has. And so when I look at video essayists, it's like, okay, I feel like if you really want to do this successfully, this is something that I talked to a person I did an interview with recently, Josiah, who runs a channel Pondering Politics, different from what you do, but more of like the David Pakman style, like does regular sort of political punditry on mainstream political issues. You just have to you have to go like full time with it. You have to devote a lot, like basically go full time, like a full time job with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's different types of political content on YouTube. I'm not necessarily trying to malign people who are not doing video essays. Video essays I see as like the more creative side of this. And so
Sure.
when talking about how to be a video essayist, the usual kinds of advice that people give to creative fields will apply.
Yeah.
But no, it's true that being a political commentator who is doing interviews, who is doing like daily or weekly commentary, that is a different thing with a different set of skills.
There you go. Someone said that many video essayists do not sort of recognize this, but clearly ContraPoints does recognize this.
Mhm.
But again, some of the same things apply. Voice is good, charisma is good.
The voice,
Yeah,
charisma.
Having some kind of a authentic perspective is good. I think, I'm not saying that it's, more straight ahead political talk show type content. I'm not saying that's inherently bad. No, it's not. And I do watch a lot of that content too.
Mhm.
I just think it's like
Who do you watch? Name names.
I don't know as much about how to do that because I've never done it, and I don't think I would be good at it.
Sure. Well, I mean, like, I guess the question is, like, how have you personally dealt with the tension of, like, we live in a, gosh, this is like a BreadTube video. We live in a capitalist society. We all got to pay bills, like,
There you go.
you feel the same kind of tensions that probably everyone else does with, like, okay, I got to make sure I'm able to pay rent and afford gas and whatnot. Like, how have you dealt with those kinds of tensions?
Well, that was especially true when I was starting out, and I did not have.
There are also additional tensions, but
I was not making very much money with this, and there definitely were videos that I uploaded because I needed to pay rent that month, and there definitely were one. I feel like videos that were made in that way often were worse.
Interesting.
But it can also be kind of good to have like a little bit of that motivation. I feel like, and in a way, I've in the last few years been suffering.
True, I have this sort of motivation, and so consider donating, because that's basically the way I make money to pay the bill.
From success a little bit, and that there's not a whip behind me so much anymore, which I think
there's a big whip behind me. What are some of these tensions? Like, for example, I go to Ukraine and I don't really have anything to stream on. So I cannot stream when I'm in Ukraine. So that is a tension, no? So I would need to get additional resources to get something to stream on, in order to be able to stream in Ukraine, right? So I guess that is an additional tension, right? Because I go to Ukraine to do the interviews, but at the same time I don't stream. And my main source of income is streaming. You see? How that sort of
slows the pace down. In some ways it's good because it allows me, creative space to like fully explore an idea. But the downside of that is I think my last video was almost 3 hours long. Sometimes a little bit of a whip behind you is helpful.
Well, you don't think a video a year is a decent enough, is a fast enough pace?
Well, it is for some people. Some people make a video a year that's so good that I wouldn't want to rush them. But I also think that I personally think I benefit from like a little bit of pressure. But yeah, I mean, when I was starting out, I mean, as with any creative thing, like, don't do it unless you need to, right? It's not getting into a creative profession like being a video essayist is like not an economically like rational decision for most people because it's extremely improbable that you'll succeed. So if you're starting out, I mean, the reason to do it can't be just that I want to get famous. Like that's because you probably
true. I want to get famous. That is basically what I do. Do you feel like I'm succeeding? Am I famous? Write it in the chat, yes or no. Is Lucy Hazet, or Hayes, as someone pronounced it? Is Lucy famous? Did I succeed in my main goal in life?
We won't, right?
Am I famous?
Again, it kind of it comes back to like, do you have something to say? if you have something to say, then there is a kind of
I do have something to say. What I have to say is I want to be famous. Okay.
satisfaction to saying it, even if
Define famous. Tons of views, tons of subscribers, and tons of cash.
that doesn't make it, even if it's not a career for you, even if it's not going to make you famous. I mean, I think I was doing this for years before. Well, okay, I was doing this for like a year before it became like really viable as a career.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like what was sustaining me was not just the hope that it would be a career, but also was that I had something to say, that I felt some kind of creative passion. And I think that if you're starting out and you don't have that, find something else to do, because it's not, being a creative of any kind is never the most economically rational decision.
I mean, I am a creative. I'm an artist. Then you're not famous? Oh gosh. Well, I guess I have to do something about it. I have to get famous. I have to get famous. You are to us, though. Oh, thank you. Well, I guess I am succeeding then.
It should be something that you do because, again, you want to. You have to. You have something that you need to get out of you.
True.
And that will kind of help you motivate to work on something like, making YouTube videos, even if you also have another job.
See, that is really fascinating, because like I feel like that is so, in my mind and in my experience from getting to know content creators and social media influencers, I feel like you can usually, and then I don't know, you can create any kind of model, but I see like I have experienced meeting like generally two different kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
People who want to be famous for its own sake, and they see social media as a way to be able to achieve that, or want to be able to make money or whatever. And then I guess comparatively, people who really have something that they want to say and want to do whatever they can to be able to communicate that, or have like some kind of, I don't know, like some kind of other goal that like motivates them beyond just like some egotistical,
Right. Yeah.
self-centered purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you want to make money,
name names.
Don't make video essays. Become a investment broker or something. I don't know. What do people who have money do? Like
go into finance.
Do but one of those things, right? Exactly.
Or date a guy in finance with a trust fund.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can. There's much more efficient ways to make money than by making YouTube video essays.
Yeah. No, I guess that's fair. So like getting into if someone wants to do effectively what you do, I think that a lot of people have this perspective that you need to come from like a really fancy background or have a fancy education. I don't know. I'm a little bit interested in learning about like your background
I am fancy.
or your history leading up to ContraPoints creation of the channel. And some of this might be public knowledge, but I think it could be useful to go over for people who aren't familiar. Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, my background is admittedly moderately fancy. There was a half of a philosophy PhD back there, and also some music school. I mean, I think that I bring that stuff to my videos, and I think that it's helpful. I don't think that it's necessary, but again, I think like you kind of bring whatever your background is to the creative thing that you're doing. It doesn't have to be a philosophy degree, right? If you want to talk about philosophy at a kind of academic or almost academic level, then it certainly helps to have a background in academic philosophy. But why should that be the thing you want to talk about? If your experience is like being a janitor, then talk about being a janitor. I'm sure there's interesting things that are the result of that experience.
Oh wow! I mean, you could be a vlogger. A janitor vlogger. That sounds kind of neat, sort of. Well, depending on what you'd be talking about, of course. But
it's
also depends on janitor where.
Like whatever your background is, that will animate your writing or your creative work.
I've got a background.
The essayist, like pre-video essayist, traditional essayist, David Sedaris, his kind of breakout work was about being an elf at the Christmas department of at a department store, like like a worker dressed as an elf. And his breakout story was nonfiction about that experience. He made it really funny. So if that's your background, then use that. Use whatever is in your background
True. Whatever
and
is in
lean
your
on that
tool belt.
as a subject matter. Don't pretend that you know a bunch of stuff about something that you don't know about, because people will always be able to tell.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because I recently. Well, I'm just thinking about this because this was the interview I had most recently. So
What if that's your gimmick? Talking about things that you don't know anything about intentionally. What if that's your background?
Josiah, he comparatively didn't come from a really, like I don't know, like any like particularly esteemed or whatever academic background. I feel like a lot of people might look at that, like what you do, and look at your background and have the takeaway of like, oh, if I want to be able to do this, I need to
Music
emulate
school.
that kind of
I need
image or
to.
that kind
I
of
need to go to music school and get a philosophy degree. True.
that kind of feeling to the viewer. Like I think about people who like intentionally put a bunch of books in their background that they probably have never.
Holy crap! Now I'm being really called out. I mean, I didn't put all these books here. They were here before, okay? I just happened to use this room. I did not intentionally put all these books here. They were here. I just happened to use this room for streaming. True. Wow. Now I really felt called out.
Never read,
Yeah.
so that they can try to communicate like, oh, I'm way smarter than than I probably actually am.
Well, people are very good at detecting fakeness. Like if you're being pretentious.
Damn. Am I being pretentious? Do I create a vibe of trying to sound smarter than I am? Am I trying to lord the books over people? I'm really feeling called out now.
That is, you're like pretending to have like some kind of knowledge and experience that you don't have. People will immediately pick up on that. I think that these kinds of things can't be faked. So again, it comes. The question of authenticity comes up a little bit. It's like,
True,
on some level,
they are.
authenticity is an illusion that's curated by the creator, but also it does help to have it attached to some real thing. And when people speak, they speak from experience, so speak from your experiences. If you're a bookish person, then sure, talk about books. Put all your books behind you, fine.
True.
But if you're not, talk about something else.
Yeah.
Talk about movies. Maybe you know about movies,
Yeah.
I felt called out by this remark about having books behind you. I felt hurt by this comment.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So back to your background and like leading up to the ContraPoints channel, something I'm interested in learning a little bit more about, because insofar as I'm aware, ContraPoints wasn't your first channel, right? You had a channel before that. And I honestly don't
Minecraft channel.
know much about it other than the fact it existed. But there was something that caused you to shift from whatever that was to what you're currently doing.
To whatever you are now.
Or like to more of what you're currently doing. Are you comfortable talking about that and like what made you do that shift? Because I mean, like,
well, I would say that I have like dabbled with YouTube since like probably 2007 or something like that, some ancient year. Initially I was just uploading like piano videos because that's what I was into at the time, was playing the piano.
Okay.
I think I had like vlogged.
Not Minecraft?
Vlogged on and off in college, but never like very seriously or to very much. Never very many people watching, so it was a hobby. I mean, I do think that I started taking it more seriously in 2016 when I realized, one, that there was kind of a space in this political
zone,
a space on YouTube political discourse that wasn't being filled, that I felt that I could fill, and also I saw it as like.
I feel like there's a space that I can fill. I'm gonna say something that is going to sound very awful. I can fill the space of a trans streamer that will not turn out to be awful. No, it's okay. Demon Mama is already filling that space. Listen, I'm filling in the Eastern European niche
audience for a potentially satisfying like creative project, which I was in search of at the time.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I think for a long time I was basically like a creator in search of an audience. I was like writing fiction and stuff back in 2015 that no one ever read. You know, I had been playing piano music to myself for
Nice. Well, I have an audience. I'm just looking to grow it. I cannot say that I'm looking for an audience. I have an audience. 13 people are watching me right now. 13 people are a lot of people. If you put 13 people in a room, that's a lot of people. You know?
I don't know, 20 years. But I was in my mid to late 20s and kind of I wanted an audience, and YouTube is where the audience was. So there was a little bit of motivation to, like, you know, instead of trying to imitate like people I admired in the past, it was like, well, look at a new. You have to look forward and be agile with what you want to do.
Be a streamer.
And notice like where the opportunity is. At the time I started, it was on YouTube. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend that someone start making political YouTube videos now, because it's very different than it was in 2016. It's probably harder to get noticed now than it was back.
It is harder to get noticed as a streamer. I know it's harder to get noticed.
Then, because there's more people who are doing it.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably true. Or at least like it feels.
I'm so gay. I've got the ultimate gay charisma, so I'm gonna make it. I believe. I have faith.
We're in a weird spot right now where it feels like almost after the point it was saturated. Like it feels like, especially like in post 2020 for the past.
No, it's not saturated. There's still place for the Eastern European girl to make her mark.
Couple of years, there's been like a really big surge of people trying to create video essays or get in kind of like this online debate culture, to the point where there's like,
yes, I'm in the debate culture. I'm the ultimate debatrix.
More people who then you can, you know, even remember in the back of your mind. And then it's like, I've seen a lot of these people then not like either not succeed or fall off or disappear or whatever. Like it seems like there were a ton of people, and now
to be fair, you sort of disappeared as well at one point, no?
Space is relatively quiet. Like for an example, I recently looked online at like the r/breadtube subreddit, and I mean, like, some people could say like, oh well, there's sometimes like almost 100 active users. That's so many. But like realistically, it's not where nearly to the point where it was, where like a couple of years ago you'd find like a couple of thousand people active on it at any given time. Like it feels like, at least to me, it feels like we've gotten to a point where something happened and there's less interest in creating that kind of content, whether it's because of difficulty with discoverability or I don't know.
I mean, my perception is that there's still a lot of people trying to do it. The audience seems only to have grown for at least the big creators.
Okay.
I'm sort of growing. I'm sort of kind of growing, right?
I mean, I think that's just objective. Like if you look at how many videos I make are getting now, or videos whoever else in this space gets H1 guy, right? They're getting more views than ever. It's probably it may be the case that there are fewer smaller creators getting it. There was like, I think, especially when you say the breadtube subreddit, I feel like there was a kind of thriving community of small creators around 2020 that has kind of broken apart for various reasons. In part because
why?
I think it's quite difficult to be a YouTuber. I mean, I'm not saying that because I think I'm saying my life is so hard.
Wow. My friend is a pretty successful YouTuber. Like, where is this? There you go. My friend is a pretty successful YouTuber.
There's a lot of challenges that people go into this not expecting, including a sudden rush of intense moral scrutiny of every aspect of your life. And it causes a lot of people to go down.
Well, if you're immoral, you have to fear. I'm moral, so I have nothing to fear.
Flames before they can get off the ground.
That's something I was thinking about talking about a little bit. Since you brought it up, like a big thing I've noticed in this space, or something that's been like a really big issue that I've been trying to figure out how to address in my head over the past couple of years is like I think a lot of people get involved in this sort of online political space with really good intentions, right? They're like, oh yeah, like there's a lot of
I've got
people
the best of intentions.
who are arguing or whatever, and like there's people engaging with these crazy people on the far right or whatever. Like, oh, I'm a pretty reasonable, well-meaning person. I can get involved in this space, and I can probably make a difference just by being nice to people and making making some decent points. And I've seen so many
I am nice. I make decent points. True. I'm all of these things.
people go.
That's a lie. I'm not reasonable. But I do make decent points.
Into the space with that kind of motivation and get just like torn to shreds by people online on like the far right and also people on the far left. Because of like that moral scrutiny, like
oh no. She referring to herself now?
Oh, constantly nitpicking at small different like I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of like the narcissism of small differences.
I'm aware.
Yeah. So like I've seen a lot of that kind of issue where people in closer proximity to other creators in terms of beliefs, where they agree on like 90% plus of their beliefs, will end up hyper focusing on like the 10% of disagreement, and then will like tear into the creators who they have that 10% disagreement with, and then largely kind of ignore the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world who end up wreaking havoc.
I mean, that is a thing, but I'm not even sure if I don't know. I mean, I know this phenomenon exists, but I mean, I cannot really objectively talk about myself, but do I do that? Like, would you say that I do that with creators with proximity to me? That I hyperfixate on the disagreements and ignore the agreements? Okay, let's start with this. What streamers am I in close proximity to? Can you name any streamers that I'm basically in beliefs and close proximity to, in your opinion? And then you can, I guess, answer the question, do I do this thing of am I in close proximity with President Sunday in beliefs? Okay then, so do I hyperfixate on my differences with President Sunday and ignore the similarities? Are there any other streamers that I'm in close proximity to in beliefs? I'm not talking about close in beliefs, I guess. That is an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I think that, I mean...
So I guess those are my two questions. What streamers am I in close proximity to? And do I do this whole 10% hyper focus on disagreement and ignore the similarities? Answer both. Chat.
A lot has been said about cancel culture on the left online.
Sure, yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how much I want to say about that, but I do think...
I think you seem pretty chill. I don't think you hyperfixate. I guess there are other content creators who fight with others more. I've not been fighting with many content creators, actually. No, one of your best qualities is that you don't hyperfixate on disagreements, I guess.
I think that like it is a significant factor that keeps people from getting...
Well, then maybe...
I think it's a significant factor that keeps a lot of people from thriving in the space, is that you have to be...
I want to thrive in the space.
Because no one goes into this knowing how to deal with it, right? It's not a skill that you really can have had before this, because there's no situation where you really had to have
YouTube chat isn't on screen. It isn't. You have to join the superior chat. Okay? You have to, in order to be on screen, you have to be in the superior chat. I've been advised to prioritize the side chat by one of your favorite streamers, by Demon Mama, because that's right. Yes, that's right. It was when I was in Ukraine that I think it was when I was still in Ukraine, the Signal Night, because I'm pretty sure I listened to Somiostatic, Colin. Yes, I remember now. Now I remember, yes. And Demon Mama told Somiostatic that we've been talking about how to organize my stream. We've been chatting with Demon Mama. And she gave me the advice on to prioritize the side chat on the screen so that people can get over to the side chat and, be cool. No, unfortunately, I did not hear you. I only listened to Somniostatic and then I went to sleep. Or something. I only listened to some of the Somniostatic. I didn't even listen to all of the Somniostatic. Demon Mama is really nice.
These skills, they're skills that you have to develop, and that means often kind of surviving several of these incidents and healing from them, because often
I mean, I've not had many of these incidents. I would actually go as far to say I have not had any big incidents. Do you feel like I've had any of these incidents?
when you're not expecting it, it can actually be kind of traumatizing to people, I think, to suddenly find yourself being like at the center of a massive public shaming. Most people are not really equipped to deal with that. I was not. I don't know anyone who has been on their first time going through it. I feel like it feels
No incidences to come to mind. Also, you should stop being white. James started to avoid the drama cycle so she doesn't get name dropped as much. It's been great for the community. True.
very overwhelming, and like this is the end for you when it happens. Oftentimes these things turn out.
Yes, RGR and ContraPoints will talk about the problems in the online politics space they occupy. True. I've not had many controversies as a creator.
Not to be as serious as they seem in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it also requires you to kind of learn to recognize that and to not let it get to you so much that it sucks
Like
all.
it's not really a controversy if a bunch of Russian shows or far righters or transphobes comment that I will never be a woman or something. That's not really, it's pretty mean, but I'm not sure if this is what they're talking about.
Motivation and pleasure from this, because it can. I think that tends to be what happens, right? Is that it's not necessarily that people get canceled in the sense that the entire audience abandons them, and that occasionally happens. In the case of
Rarely.
like the recent well-known YouTube plagiarist who basically has had everyone bail on watching his videos.
Sure.
But I think most cases of what we were calling canceling on YouTube are not that total.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times sometimes it is like the creator who kind of destroys themselves, right? It starts with like, oh, a bunch of people are spreading this rumor that you have this terrible belief or whatever, and then
and then
the
you confirm it
temptation
through action.
is to go on Twitter and write, part one of 97. Why
to do a manifesto. I have no idea who James Somerton is. Hello, Connor. Oh my God, Connor, you're here. Okay, I'm gonna say this. Connor, I was planning this to be the last thing today, but if you stop being white, then I promise to you, I have no idea how much I have left. I promise to you to finish Drakengard today. But you need to stop being white. This is like this payoff, okay? Then we'll do this interview, and then I'll jump straight to Drakengard. I promise you this.
My haters
There's a
are wrong
promise that I make to you.
and why I am vindicated.
Since
And
you're
like you
here.
start arguing with these people, it starts occupying more and more of your time, and then your sort of public persona that used to be varied and interesting and
James Somerton is some guy who did plagiarism. H Bomber guy did a video about James, but I didn't watch it. I mostly heard about James via other content creators, something about it.
had a variety of interests. You now become the like, you know, you become a full-time defender of this one position of this one hill that you insist on dying on.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a parallel with
That is a bit of what happened to RGR, by the way. Just saying.
with people like there's a little bit of
That is a little bit of a something that happened to RGR. The insisting on dying on that one hill, which was first it was self ID and then it became feet, I guess. It was very. I'm so glad.
Oh, Barry!
I'm so glad that she moved away from all that nonsense and just focuses on real life politics now. I'm so glad. Also, thank you. Deal. Okay. So we just have to go through the rest of the interview and then we jump straight into Drakengard.
parallel with people like J.K. Rowling, who I think get backlash.
Yeah, hopefully RGR improves. I think RGR is improving. At least she's focusing on what's relevant. She's focusing on what's important, which is good. You know? Because let's face it, becoming more active in real life about politics is pretty important. But thank you. Thank you for subscribing. I'm really gonna need it because I'm heading to Ukraine again. Did you know that I went to Ukraine, Connor? I'm going again. I'm going again very soon.
For a position that they take publicly and then get so obsessed with doubling down and tripling down on
End
that
up like
position
hyper focusing on it.
that it kind of consumes them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, she's doing real world work and she's trying to get more people to get more active in real world politics, which is good.
These are people who used to have like more interesting lives with more diverse interests. They used to tweet about all kinds of things. They used to have a wider range of people they interacted with, and then it all becomes this kind of monochrome of it becomes their personality. Basically, is the person who will die on this hill.
I mean, sort of you get sort of hurt by what's being said, and it sort of becomes a whole thing. Unfortunately,
that's who they become, and it's kind of scary to watch in a way because it seems like so many people are vulnerable to slipping into this habit. But it helps to recognize the pattern.
I mean, people feel like their character is being, I don't know, attacked, and they feel like they have to defend themselves. And the more they feel that their feelings are not getting across, that they're not being understood, the more they want to defend themselves. So this is where the whole monochrome thing comes from, right? They add more and more and more and more because they feel because they think I don't feel like people get what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense? So they add more, of course. To sort of like this, you know?
And kind of try to catch yourself. Like, okay, I feel like I'm pretty impervious to this at this point because of how much backlash I've managed to get through at this point that it's kind of like, yeah. Like, I know how that goes and I know how to like spit it out basically. But sometimes, I do catch myself. Like, I think like last year I was finding myself doing like 10 tweets a month where I was being angry at Elon Musk And I think that my anger at Elon Musk was justified. However,
Yeah.
you don't want to be a person whose entire online personality is hating Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Right? You have to look at yourself and be like, is this who I want to wake up every morning? And is this the life I choose for myself? It's good to monitor yourself in that way to make sure that one little grievance or there's not like one specific axe to grind that basically absorbs your entire public career, which seems to happen alarmingly often to a lot of people.
So a really interesting thing that I picked up, because I think I have come to
Oh, you live in Maryland?
a similar sort of observation on my own, and I'm not going to get into like particular dramas, but what I noticed,
Hold on.
and I'm not going to come to a similar sort. So a really interesting thing that I picked up, because I think I have come to a similar sort of observation on my own.
Well, you have experience.
And I'm not going to get into like particular.
How do you like Maryland? Do you like living in Maryland? Quite a few streamers came from Maryland, by the way. At least 3 that I can think of.
Particular dramas.
And that 3 includes Riley Grace Rochon.
But what I noticed is that over the past year, or I guess like the past several years, since I've been getting a lot more involved with like people in the Maryland legislature, with Wes Moore's race, and now that he's the governor, people, like a lot of the people who do like, I guess we'll call like IRL politics, have no awareness whatsoever, or like very little awareness whatsoever of the online political space. I think it was only just like today or just recently where I saw, what's his name? He's a representative out of Florida, younger, very progressive. The name will come to me in a second. I don't know why I'm forgetting it. I just saw him tweet out like, oh, I just watched the Majority Report this morning and I was super excited about it or whatever. And that was striking me because I was like, that's like the first time, or one of the first times I've seen like a major politician actually pay attention to like this online space. I mean, like there are other examples of it. You did your interview with, I am so stupid for this. What's her name? Hillary. Yeah. I'm sorry. Listen, I'm going to...
Not prepared. RGR came unprepared for this interview. Cancelled.
Blame the ADHD on this one, all right? I'm going to 100% blame it there. But, you know...
It's alright, expensive to live here, but where isn't housing a mess? Great food here, though. So I've heard.
You had an obscure figure. In
yeah, very
politics.
Obscure figure. Yeah.
Pretty off the mainstream.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm a terrible interviewer, but you know, like you had your interview with her, and like there are like one-off instances, but for the most part, it's pretty rare because I think that a lot of mainstream politicians or people who work in like mainstream politics tend to operate in like a separate field. And it's not to say that they aren't in theory interested in the online space, but they just haven't, for whatever reason, they just haven't really tapped into it. Like when I worked over in the Maryland legislature, I knew several senators who would be like, there would be session happening and they would be tweeting.
I never saw that either.
From the session, like from the floor of the Senate, to like, you know, maybe get like 5 or 6 likes on something and be like, oh my God, I'm like internet famous, you know? So it's like, there's interest there.
I'm internet famous.
But you know, to go back to, you know, why I'm bringing this up in the first point, it's just sort of separate sphere right now. Like the spheres have not overlapped enough to where like, you know, the governor of Maryland is tweeting at leftist political YouTubers and vice versa. And so it's like, when I think about online dramas, if there's like some random leftist or whatever, some random super conservative whatever who's tweeting at me or whatever, I've never heard about any drama spilling over into mainstream political circles that start.
That's true. Can I? Oh no, wait. There was Sargonova Cad. That one spilled into the mainstream. You cannot say that one didn't spill into the mainstream. Sargons, I wouldn't even remark. That spilled super into the mainstream, actually.
It's online. Like these it typically doesn't make the jump, whether it's because they don't have
It didn't, but it did spill.
those connections or whether or not those follows just don't overlap. Like it seems like these are relatively separate. So as long as you don't engage with it directly, it doesn't really affect you in terms of like in IRL politics. At least that's been my experience.
I mean, is it desirable that mainstream politicians would be engaging with online drama?
I mean, it's more of a right-wing thing. The right wing might be more connected compared to the left wing.
I'm not convinced that that's desirable.
I mean, not engaging with online drama, but I think that there's, and this goes back to like part of what I've been thinking about and what I've been trying to like, what I've been dwelling on, which is like, how can you get these spheres to overlap? Because I think that there's interest from both sides. I think that politicians are interested in reaching young.
I mean, that is technically speaking what progressive victory is about, isn't it? Overlapping these spheres.
People to get more involved in campaigns and whatnot. I think that young people like want to get more involved and want to feel like they're having a lot more of an impact, right? But I also don't ever want to like introduce a major politician to someone who's probably going to be turning around the next day and then going to war with a random person on Twitter number 10,001, and then they look like a crazy person.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm like a bit reluctant to.
I don't have any wars on Twitter.
Endorse the idea.
Because I'm not really active on Twitter. I should become more active on Twitter.
Idea of mainstream politics merging with.
Oh, your parents know who Hassan is.
Internet,
damn.
Niche political communities,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not entirely convinced that the internet as a whole has been good for political discourse. I mean, I think that there's pockets of where
I mean, you could say that about any medium, to be quite honest. I'm not convinced that the press as a whole has been good for political discourse, believe it or not. I'm not sure if the television has been good as a whole, I'll be right back. I have to go to the toilet. Does Lucy want to get into Twitter drama? Well, I don't know. I want to be more visible on Twitter so that I can get more people to watch this thing. I'm going to be right back. Go to the toilet. BRB. People can change. I'm back. You gotta get some quality collabs for Lucy. What collabs are you thinking of? Oh yeah, write in the chat. Thank you for the welcome back. Write in the chat what sort of collaborations you'd like to see me do. And I will do my best to make it happen.
Stuff is happening, but I think on the whole, it's actually been pretty bad. So I think that on the one hand, I'm sort of reluctant to be like, oh, well, we need to get politicians more aware of like what's happening on RedTube. Like, do we? Like, I in a way, I would prefer that they didn't. And I think things are still at a point where politicians can get away with not caring about what's going on online. Like, I think Joe Biden, for example.
I'm not gonna lie, I barely watch any lefty streamers other than you and Sunday, so I have no suggestions. Oh, you don't watch any political streamers at all? Nobody? Interesting. Maybe I should have Doe on stream.
Got elected in 2020 despite Twitter basically hated Joe Biden, and it didn't matter, right? He didn't try to win at Twitter, nor did he have to, right? Twitter is not who votes. Twitter is a small group.
You don't think that the random
the population?
Yeah, you don't think that.
I don't know other leftists. Maybe Abigail Thorne. Smarter ones might be Cyrus and Conyer. Conyer! I'd love to get a collab with Conyer.
The random person on Twitter saying, well, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden.
I think
you don't think they're going to make a difference?
I think Twitter is like a small and very unrepresentative minority of people who are like largely much more extreme than the average voter. That said, I also think that with an increasingly, as millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha become a growing percentage of the population, it is kind of inevitable that someone is going to be a streamer and then run for office. Or so, you know what I mean? Because this is the media. These are the media of political communication for younger generations. And so this is going to be the location where future politics happens. And the distinction between online and offline will get less...
It'll get blurry. Let's just put it like that. Can you name me the... With Otro, can you name me the streamers that you've given up on and the ones that you're still watching?
Yeah,
less distinct, and that does kind of fill me with dread, but I also feel like it's kind of inevitable.
Yeah, like I think about and I share some of your feelings about, the hesitancies with having these spheres kind of merge over time, because I do think that a lot of people, like there's a lot of online influencers who I don't think would be able to handle those relationships well, like people who are very quick.
Name names.
To be, I'm trying to figure out the right, like very quick to burn a bridge, let's say.
Now I really want to hear some names.
That's just a really...
Is it Destiny? Destiny's pretty quick to burn a bridge.
Bad instinct to have if you want to do like mainstream political work, because building bridges and maintaining those, even with people who you might not be on 100% the best terms with, is really vital.
I mean, I do pay attention to this space because I'm part of it. I cannot not pay attention to this space, since even if I'm small, I'm still part of it.
For coalition building, right? Like if you want to pass a piece of legislation, or if you want to get someone elected, right? You're going to have to get the support of a lot of people who you might not agree on 100%, but you might. But that's not the baseline question. The question is just whether or not they agree with you on enough to where you can be able to accomplish whatever it is you're trying to get done, right? And that just goes way antithetical to how a lot of people I see online think about certain issues, where everything is very black and white.
Well, the purity testing becomes an obstacle to doing any kind of actual political action or forming any kind of actual coalition.
Sure.
And I think purity testing to some extent is understandable when it's like, who do you want in your community? But I also think this is why like political activism and political organizing have to be in some ways separate from people's social circles, because in order to have a successful political coalition, you have to include a lot of people you wouldn't want to be friends with. But I think online, the distinction between the kind of like parasocial following of a public figure, for example, or a community based on essentially fandom of a collection of creators is going to be much more like, is going to have that kind of purity culture where they don't want to be in community with people who have certain disagreements with them. And so, but that's like,
I think that depends on the disagreements, quite frankly. Right? I think it depends just how fundamental the disagreements are.
it is definitely something that's not how actual organizing or coalition building.
Who? When? Obvious choice, and folks have mentioned working with Lucy to him. When and who?
Works. So, you know, I think we kind of need to clarify in a given space, like, what is this? Is this a fandom or is this a movement?
Yeah.
And I think that those two things are in fact different, despite what a lot of people inside the fandom think.
Yeah. And this is it's a really big hurdle, right? Because when you think about like I see certain like I see certain proofs of concept where I think that there is a lot of ability to be able to mobilize people online. Like I see for example, in February, the organization Progressive Victory,
which you're a part of,
they worked with the streamer Destiny to get a really substantial amount of people out.
Right,
to...
but Destiny is pretty controversial. Wait, chatters actually might... Okay, I have to ask the obvious, okay? I don't mean to be ungrateful. I don't mean to be an ungrateful person, but if those chatters mention me, then why don't they watch me? What a dilemma, isn't it? They mention me, and yet they don't watch me. They should not just mention me, they should watch me. True. You should be in chat right now.
Basically work on a state level election.
Maybe there's just lurkers. Maybe. There are 14 people in the chat now. Maybe some of them are those chatters that... Wait, what community is ban happy for every little thing? You have mentioned me in his chat. What did you say? Oh, Destinies. I'm not surprised, frankly. RGR has resigned from PvP. Wait, what is PvP? Player versus player? Also, Somniostatic, you're white. Of all people, you should not be white. Progressive Victory. Has she? I had no idea.
Right. For context, typically for that kind of canvassing effort, you'd be happy if you're able to get like 10 people. Like that's a really good day. If you can get like 10, 15 people, you'd be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah. They were able to get over 300 people over 2 days to knock on like 40,000.
Why am I a troll?
What, like insane numbers, right? So there is a lot.
Hold on. Why am I a troll? I'm not a troll.
Potential I see in the space, and I think that a lot of other creators could emulate that if they figured out the alchemy. Although it's still a lot of open waters. But to what you said, like you run into.
Listen, all I'm saying is that you should not be white.
The issue where there is a lot of I'm not sure if purity testing is the right word, because a lot of conservatives will try to like super morally
I'm
load
pretty
that. I
pure.
think that like
Yeah.
the better term is probably like
Pure as snow.
I don't know, like interrogating people who join your community, because a lot of people who spend time online, like to be charitable to this kind of perspective, I could see like very typical for like discords, right? You have a lot of people who are left, maybe there's some form of LGBT plus, and they join because they're in an environment where they don't know a lot of other queer people IRL, and that's like their main social outlet. And this is also at the same time when there's a lot of conservatives and Republicans and whatnot who are trying to like really push an anti-LGBT agenda nationwide. So they're super, while that's constantly happening, I understand getting super sensitive to the idea of like, oh,
Yeah.
are you the kind of person who wants to legislate my healthcare access away, right? And so, it makes sense to, I think, like be a little bit more sensitive to people with different political backgrounds if you're in something like an online space, like a Discord or whatever, where if you have someone who joins who's like, oh,
I have a Discord. I think this command should work. Okay, why do no commands work when I use them? It should work. Shouldn't it? Jesus.
I'm conservative, people might be like, well, what the fuck does that mean? So
yeah, I mean, well, like to take like an example, like suppose there's another leftist influencer, totally hypothetical, who like makes a lot of misogynistic jokes.
I am that. I am this hypothetical creator. I do a lot of misogynistic jokes. I am the queen of the kitchen. That did not land very well. It was a misogynistic joke, technically speaking. I love the confidence in your selfie channel on Discord. They give me a life. True. Yeah, I believe she's referencing Vosh here.
Totally hypothetical.
Yeah, and like suppose I just like don't want to be in community with someone who constantly is making misogynistic jokes.
Damn, who might she be talking about?
I have the kind of personality where I will separate myself from that person because I just like I don't have the room for this nonsense in my life. However, I also recognize that like sometimes when it comes to politics at the big level, you do have to recognize yourself as in coalition with people who you may have pretty significant disagreements with about that kind of thing.
Sure.
So I don't know. I still have questions about like how I should really conduct myself publicly. Like, do I want to participate in call-outs or not? I don't know. I feel conflicted about it.
I mean, you did the Vosh call out, so you're not that conflicted about it.
But it is something that I think is worth like thinking about, and I am like a little bit troubled sometimes thinking about the effects of like
Nice band.
how many conflicts I've had with people over this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm actually conflict free. I'm happy to say I'm a conflict free creator, which is actually a pretty rare thing if you think about it.
No, I get it. Dealing with other online content creators, at least in my experiences, is interestingly like very similar to the thought process of dealing with like other IRL political stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
Because like, let's say that you have a moderate Democrat, right? The Maryland legislature is full of moderate Democrats
Maybe.
who aren't necessarily going to vote, down the ballot on leftist policies in every single issue.
You can just make content and not talk to other people like a true Sigma. I mean, I'm not sure if it'll end well for me. I'll just end with a small audience forever if that happens.
Right. If one of them votes on a bill in a way where it's like, wait a second.
You know that I can call into food shops as well now.
really don't like that, but then they otherwise consistently vote the way I want them to on a lot of other issues, it's hard, right? Because like you have someone who's otherwise a really strong supporter on a lot of issues, but there's a strong disagreement, and figuring out how to deal with that is really difficult often, you know? Whether it's, well, yeah, I don't know. Like there is overlap there. I guess that's the main point of that comment.
Yeah, I mean, there's no community without conflict, right?
Yeah.
So I think that at some level this
I don't know about that, Lucy. About what? Calling into food shops or what?
is inevitable, and
Also, it's really interesting that ContraPoints earlier said that people online are bad at working together with even people that you don't like for the greater good, and then said, but I cannot work with this misogynistic creator that makes misogynistic works. I don't like him, so I cannot work with him. You know, I did sort of those content creators that cannot work with people they don't like. I mean, you just said you cannot work with a person you don't like.
not necessarily something you can boil down to like a problem with a name like purity testing or cancel culture, right? It's conflict. Conflict is part of any.
I mean, I had a debate with food shops, just so you know, about genocide. So I could talk with her about the conversation she had with President Sunday recently.
Community of human beings. So I think that
we've talked before.
Learning to be able to sort of sit with and acknowledge the and just like deal with the inevitability of conflict, and sort of without containing it so that it blows up in the most destructive kind.
It's on the channel, the debate. It's uploaded, and yes, I did win. Sort of, kind of. It was more of a, as all my debates, it was more of a conversation than a debate.
The ways should be the goal, rather than eliminating conflict altogether, which is not possible.
So, in regard to your platform and your community, like, I mean, like, I understand, because, like, I definitely can understand, based on what you said, your hesitancies with merging, you know, like, with having more overlap between, like, IRL and online political spheres. But I've also seen you do a lot of really good work. Like, I see you do streams where you'll fundraise for charities. I think that that is really useful.
I did a nice stream when I was far. Did you know that I did a fundraiser when Hogwarts Legacy was new? Hassan bailed from doing his little charity stream playing Hogwarts. I was much smaller than even now. I was a very, very small streamer. I don't think I was even monetized then. So I did my little what's it called? The charity stream. $1,000 for a Trevor project. Yeah. You know? Which I will say, for my size, it was a bit of an achievement, okay? To gain the 1,000. Especially since there was no super big support from other creators for the fund, for the charity. I'm not sure if we had any support from other streamers. For that one.
I see you use your platform to promote certain issues every now and again. So I guess, like, from your perspective, what do you think is the best way for maybe other video essayists or for people who engage with this online political space in general, if they wanted to try and make a difference in, you know, whether it's the 2024 election or just like have a positive impact in the IRL space? Like, what's your wisdom for them? Like, what's your best advice?
Are we talking about people who already have a platform or people aspiring to a platform?
Let's talk about people who already have a platform, because that's where you're starting from.
Wait, who did you watch in the past? I'm sorry? Tai?
Well, I mean, that in that case, we're basically talking about myself. Like, what do? I mean, I don't know. I'm working on it. I think that I certainly do. And in some ways, I've kind of removed myself from a lot of like the daily like feuds over political issues, because it just becomes
buckle in. By the way, we're less than halfway through this video, and I did make a promise, and I will keep that promise. So this is turning into a this is going to be a marathon stream because I did promise to play Drakengard after this, and I will keep my promise.
It just brings a lot of like discord into my life that I've sort of gotten sick of.
Mhm.
But I also think that, you know, there's certain issues where I will want to use the power of the platform.
Sure.
And I feel like I have some obligation to do that. So it gets
It's gonna
very
be
complicated
blind.
though. Like take for
I don't
example,
try anything in that game, not on stream. So I haven't tried anything. It's gonna be blind. It's gonna be completely blind.
there's a sort of intense amount of pressure I think at the
We'll
moment
see you. And endeavors. I hope to see you regularly, a regular viewer.
to say something about the situation in Gaza. So I am critical, very critical, of like the Biden administration's sort of lack of action on that. But I also am conscious of the fact that at some point I'm essentially like, there's a 99% chance that I'm going to need to endorse this person's reelection because the consequences are extremely high,
Not good.
right, for this election. And I feel like even like disagreements, even massive disagreements on issues that would otherwise be like insurmountable, sort of have to be overcome in the interest of like making sure that this like future has like this country has a viable future, basically.
Yeah.
Right. So
well, it's not really difficult to figure out what's being talked about here. So that's not really like, you know.
So I think that, you know, I am at the moment on Twitter I will say critical things of the Biden administrations, and I will say
I feel like some lefties are not aware of this, especially those who say not to vote at all.
things, you know, in support of the people in Gaza, but I also like know that at some point I'm going to somewhat awkwardly have to pivot to supporting to basically endorsing that people vote for Joe Biden. How am I going to handle that? Well, to me, it's about timing, right? That's the calculation that I'm making. That like, what is useful now? Well, right now I'm not telling people to vote for Biden. Why? Because that's not what people need to hear right now necessarily, right? Right now, the useful thing would be for the progressive base to voice that we care about Gaza and we want the administration to do something about it. Now that dynamic is going to shift by September or October, right? When it will suddenly be like very urgent to defeat Donald Trump. So, you know, but these are like difficult calculations to make. And when you have a big platform, you have thousands of people who will feel that you got it wrong no matter what you do and will be very angry about it. So the easier thing to do is to say nothing about anything, right? Every post sometimes every time I post on social media, it sometimes feel like, why am I posting? A post is just an opportunity to be hated, you know?
Yes.
And so it's like, why am I doing this? And it's like, well, because sometimes it's worth being hated, right? And like, you know, some people obviously will see me as like a villain, but some people will also see that I'm attempting to do the best that I can in this situation. And will that ever be good enough? No, right? Because no one's perfect. But, you know, I'm making a good faith effort. And, you know, I
wonder where this is.
That on the issues where wielding a large platform is likely to actually have some kind of impact.
I usually like the scales to be evened out, by the way. I like the scales to be like perfectly evened out. Even ever since I was small, family members had scales at their house. My grandfather had scales at his house, and I always did it for them to be perfectly evened out. So it sort of annoys me to see scales that are not evened out. That is a very weird tangent, but it's reality.
That's what I try to like notice what those things are. I think that, you know, presidential elections are kind of an obvious one. Where like telling 1.5 million people or whatever to vote a certain way probably has some kind of impact. And so I feel like, a responsibility to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. It's funny because I think that you actually took the words out of my mouth. I've been thinking a lot about this.
I have a mouth.
And specifically, like, I think I arrived at the same conclusion that like every opinion is an opportunity for someone to hate you, right? And that makes it really hard.
I'm not so sure. I don't have many haters. So I'm not sure if every opportunity is for people to hate me.
Because it means that you could try to be as reasonable as possible, but like kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about how a lot of people who aren't familiar with social media in general, this isn't even just exclusive to online politics, this is, I think, just like a social media issue, is that most people are not prepared for when you say something.
Being a hater, I can become one. Don't worry, Lucy. Thank you.
That you personally feel like is relatively benign, regardless of whether or not it is. But if you say something that you feel like is relatively benign, then someone responds.
Oh yeah, but those were random chatters, especially from Poland. The most hate I received as a streamer, live on stream, is from strange live Polish commentators
And says that you're the most
who come in and start saying weird things in Polish.
Awful, hateful, whatever person possible. It just it messes with your head, right?
Yeah, and this is not unique to politics by any means, by the way. Like I know a lot of people who discuss media on YouTube or on social media, and if you say you think a movie is bad, there will be people who will be offended by that.
Panada did get really mad at me and did a whole video about me, yes, calling me a pedophile rapist or something on his video response. Also, I had a whole thing with Chud Logic, but that thing ended a long time ago.
To their core,
yeah,
and who will come for you with the intensity of any political disagreement. So it's not just politics, right? I mean, I think some like in recent times, like some of the most like intense like hate storms I brought upon myself have been like opinions about a movie I just saw in a tweet that I spent 20 seconds writing because it didn't occur to me that this was going to cause a lot of people to get very upset.
Yeah.
So yes, you do kind of get used to this idea that everything you say is going to upset someone.
But it really pushes this idea that like you just shouldn't say anything at all.
Right. Well, it makes you want to say less. And so you do say less. And I say much, much less than I used to about everything.
Yeah.
Right? I think I'm posting less frequently. What I do post is tends to be much more cautious and reserved. If I have some like controversial, edgy opinion, unless I'm like drunk and it's 2 a.m., I'm not tweeting that.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that the downside of this, of course, is that there's some issues where you sort of have to say something.
Sure.
Because, if you don't say something...
I always say something.
There will be hundreds of angry people telling you that you're complicit with a genocide.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a cost-benefit analysis,
so
right?
But I also think that... I mean, I don't exactly want to appeal to, like, oh, the poor influencers, like, we should feel sorry for, like, the plight that we're in. Like, that's not what I'm saying necessarily, but I do think people are often sort of uncertain what they want. I mean, I remember in the summer of 2020, after the killing of George Floyd, there was, Black Lives Matter protests all over the city. Basically, every influencer in any industry whatsoever, beauty, like business, like felt some, pressure to say something. And there's these like slogans, silence is violence. Like if you are silent, you are complicit. And like I think that there's some truth to that, but on the other hand, a lot of influencers are not equipped to say something intelligent about this, right? They do not have the experience or the knowledge to say something worth saying to their audience.
Sure.
And so this causes trouble, right?
I always say intelligent things that are worth saying, and that brings something to my audience. This is my biggest power.
Like, again...
Even if it's just nitpicking a Polish word's pronunciation.
It always is kind of a difficult situation for me to navigate whenever there's something like really serious occurring, a war.
Yeah.
Right? How do you talk about a war or a massacre or police brutality?
Depends, doesn't it? What war? What do you know about the region? What do you know about the history of the region? What do you know about the sides of the conflict? Like, those are the things that, the more you know of these things, the more you will have to add about that particular war. It also helps to even go there.
Entertainment platform, right? It's tough because on the one hand you feel like if you say nothing, then you are sort of being silent and being complicit in that way. But it's also difficult to think.
Then Tai during BLM. I remember those days.
Of what to say that is not the equivalent of posting a black square on Instagram, which is what a lot of influencers did in the summer of 2020 and has been like widely mocked as like a completely like useless like gesture of empty support. So, you know, I mean, obviously the ideal thing is to be extremely articulate and educated about the topic in question and to have all kinds of interesting, knowledgeable
I mean, you can always read a bit about it in your free time.
insights about it, but you know, that's
just
easier
like,
said than done. Right?
yeah.
So and on, I mean, I think.
Well, you don't have to chime in on everything, but at least if you decide that you want to, at least get informed somewhat about it.
I mean, the Gaza issue has really been tough for me because I feel like I don't have any particular expertise on this topic, and it's extremely thorny in terms of how many ways that you can say the wrong thing. So it's balancing the pressure of like say something but not the wrong thing is devoted a lot of time.
Well, maybe it's because I'm small, but I don't have that pressure. I say constantly I don't know enough about the conflict and the history to talk a lot about it. I said it when I talked with Lonerbox.
I would say,
it's
required a lot of time from me, which fair enough. I'm the one who signed up for this, so it's what I have to do. But it's
sometimes it's fine to just say I don't have enough information, knowledge on this topic to substantially add anything to it. It's fine to say that.
And people should be probably aware of that.
No, I definitely get that. And it makes sense because like I've seen so many larger influencers who I think, and well, actually I don't even think, like I know are reasonably intelligent people who make lots of really substantial and knowledgeable contributions on different subjects, going back to what we were talking about earlier, where they're really passionate about something, right? And then I see them go on Twitter and suddenly they're tweeting about something that I've never seen them do any research or make any kind of video or do anything, never talk about at all previously. And suddenly they're saying something and I'm like, wait a second, like, I don't know.
Well, there are a lot of things that you can say about that conflict, actually.
That's true. I don't know if I agree with that position. I don't like when people begin to like step out of their areas of expertise, it's really difficult because like I definitely see that pressure put on influencers to say something, but like I guess this goes back to what you're saying that like, sometimes people don't know what they're actually wanting because it's like you're asking people who don't actually know necessarily all the relevant details or who don't have expertise to say something when it's like it's not really their place to.
Do we want Justin Bieber's opinion on Palestine? I mean, his opinion on Palestine probably sucks. So Palestine
something when it's like it's not really their place to.
Do we want Justin Bieber's opinion on Palestine? I mean, his opinion on Palestine probably sucks. So probably the answer is no. But I think people,
it's like, what the hell does Justin Bieber know about Palestine to begin with?
Why are we listening to him?
Yeah.
And then they were all shocked and humbled when Justin Bieber came out as a as a person that in his spare time reads about Palestine all the time, is actually a Palestine-Israel expert, and will give us a big speech about the situation and the political breakdown.
But I mean, like a lot of people.
And then you would both feel very silly.
Tend to like.
Because you have judged a book by its cover.
And I think this goes back to even at the beginning, talking about like people who will try to emulate larger creators, maybe for the wrong reasons initially, where people will see fame and equate that to expertise.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a big issue that people, maybe it's just like a matter of like growing through that kind of assumption. But I won't name names, but like I know a decent amount of
Name names.
Like people who will make video essays where they have really good editing and set design and it aesthetically looks very pleasing, but then the substance isn't particularly impressive to me because there isn't really much substance or much intellectual rigor there. And it's just like, well, I feel like this isn't really, this is just kind of like
Okay,
dangling
some creators come to mind, like the whole Ribbentrop Molotov thing.
keys in front of a kid, or like, well, I shouldn't be like that, that demeaning about it, but like, there probably is an extent to where
True. The key thing in front of a kid actually has a purpose, unlike those essays. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm starting to be mean.
people just kind of have to like grow through that because they still end up being very successful. They still end up getting a large following. But it's hard to like kind of dictate to people, oh, well, you shouldn't like this person,
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you
shouldn't like this person.
have all the trappings of a well-produced video essay, it still has to have a soul. Like,
sure.
If a video essay can have a soul, it's the thing that matters most. If your camera quality is bad, if your lighting is not great, all that is excusable in my view if the video's core message is interesting.
Good.
And if you deliver it in an interesting way, right?
Good.
That kind of stylistic aesthetic stuff is extra. If all you have is extra, if all you have is like decorations on a basically soulless video, none of it really matters.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to get a little bit more into like your specific model, if that's all right. So like, could you talk about your day-to-day? Like, what is like the actual production process like for your videos?
I hope I have substance.
Well, it's very different based on what stage of the video I'm in. So one thing about making video essays, especially if you do not have a big team, which I do not, I barely have any team at all. In fact, I don't know that I have someone who helps me with a lot of administrative stuff, responding to emails, scheduling appearances and things like that. But when it comes to making the videos, it basically is just me that's doing it, along with some people who I will get to help me sometimes do voiceovers or who will do some like research help for me. But I would say that I'm doing 98 to 99% of the work. And I think that, so if it's a day where I'm researching, research for me can be an activity that rapidly gets blurred with procrastination because, you can always do more research on a topic, and writing is very difficult for me. So I will tend to procrastinate on it by doing more research. But that involves, reading books.
I procrastinate.
Reading articles, watching videos, finding sources, that kind of stuff. On a day where I'm writing, I would say the day is like, there's no boss, there's no one telling you what to do, so it's all your own internal motivation. You wake up at a crisp 11 a.m., you procrastinate for 9 hours, until you hate yourself so much that you force yourself to sit down with like a drink in hand and like finally actually tap out words on the page, which you can then fix during tomorrow's.
Damn. That is
procrastination section. And then eventually you have a script, and usually by the time my script is done, I'll be frantic because of how long it's been since the last upload, and I'm like, I need to film this. Sure. That's the only thing that causes the script to be finished. Filming, I would say, I'm usually doing it, I'm pretty much always these days filming at home. So I will spend a day like, basically creating a set, usually which is like some modification of a room of my house that already exists, that I will then like, kind of escalate to the level of a set through putting like topically relevant things in an aesthetically pleasing order. I'll usually like set up a monitor so I can look at like what I'm doing and then create a set that way. And then on the day that I'm filming, I'm often filming between like 11 p.m. and like 6 a.m.
Oh my God.
That's kind of the hours that I will film at.
So why?
Well, for a couple of reasons. Like, one is that you have like stable control of the lighting at night. Another is that if you are filming in a city apartment, which I am, you have noise all day, and sometimes at night too, right? But I would say like less traffic noise.
I mean, if you have solid windows, then the traffic goes like
the night hours, so that is a cleaner audio that you get as a result of it. And also, I'm just like a nocturnal person and a terrible procrastinator, so nothing ever happens until panic sets in. So again, the camera ends up turning on at midnight.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So like for your research process though, because like
I
with your
don't suggest this method to anyone else, by the way. It's just how things end up happening with me.
yeah, no, I definitely get that. Like I've worked very hard
It's pretty quiet here, by the
to
way.
try and get a normal sleep schedule. But I feel like it is slipping away from me partially
It is 5 a.m. I don't have a normal sleep schedule.
due to my partner because she is a big night owl. But I digress. So with your research, like how, because like with especially like some of your more recent videos, it seems like you cite to a wide variety of different content, whether it's philosophical works or pieces of pop media or like it's just all over the place. So I guess I'm curious, like, what's your general process for research? How do you identify what is relevant for at least what you're working on? How do you identify good books to read that seem to be good for whatever project you're working on? Like, yeah, what's your process for like where you put your attention?
Well, I'd say it's always some combination of drawing on past experience and sort of novel research and like free association. Like sometimes, so by past experience, I mean, I don't know. So I did this video about Twilight, which is the last one I uploaded, which is, I mean, it's really a video about like feminine sexuality and the morality of feminine sexuality, which is like often discussed online. So I guess, drawing from a lot of different sources, from like the history of the romance novel, or from the philosophy of desire, or from online debates about 50 Shades of Grey from 9 years ago, right? So it's like, it's like a wide
And then Twilight.
variety of like stuff that I'm engaging with. And I think that, when I say past experience, I guess I'm like, I read Pride and Prejudice in the past, so I know like of this like lineage and literature, but I'll revisit it as research, right?
Sure.
Then like sometimes like with like novel stuff, I will, I'll look at what people are saying on forums. Like I'll find like arguments on Tumblr or like Reddit even about this, and then see if sources get cited in that, and then something from there I will look it up. Or sometimes reading one book will cite another, and then that takes you on a journey to that one.
Fair enough.
So like I recently did a Patreon video about
I look for primary sources. I have to start reading the primary sources.
Called granola fascism, or like what people often call conspirituality now, the kind of like combination of like right-wing conspiracy theory culture with like new age spirituality.
Okay.
And I guess I was reading this book by Naomi Klein, Doppelgangers, which in large part deals with this topic. Naomi Klein cites Barbara Ehrenreich's book, Natural Causes, which is about like the wellness movement. And I was like, oh, I've never heard of that book, but it sounds relevant. So then I'll go read that too. So, often it's kind of these chains of citation and association. That's how,
That's fair.
over weeks of doing research for main channel video these days, it is weeks of research. Like it will, kind of come together based on that type of association.
Okay, so would you say that it's like following? Because I definitely hear that. It sounds like it's mostly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like it's mainly following like your chain of interest, right? Or like following where your interest is at. Comparatively, like when I was doing policy work for a certain piece of legislation over in Maryland, it's like a very different kind of engagement type where it's like you're mainly focusing on like very dry academic literature, and like doing research for that is, I mean, like, to an extent it's interesting, right? But I don't think that like when people think about doing research, I think that that's more so like what they tend to have in mind. Whereas like it sounds like what you're doing is more aligned with like, oh, I'm reading this, and
I
this.
guess technically speaking, with what I do, you could say both. You could have both dry literature as well as more thrilling stuff.
Author is talking about this other piece of potentially interesting literature, so I'm going to follow that because it seems interesting, and then just like kind of keep following until you run out of interesting material.
Well, technically speaking, she didn't say interesting. She said relevant to what I'm,
Is that accurate, or would you say it's different?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do read some dry academic stuff, but I think that because in the end,
Good night,
there's
Gregory.
an interesting ambiguity with video essays where in some ways it does resemble like writing an academic article,
Sure.
but in other ways, and I think in the end, it does have to be entertainment. So it's a little odd that you're doing this much academic research for something that it will in the end be entertainment. But I think that
Well, I don't necessarily agree, right? History can be very entertaining, but history is an academic endeavor at the end of the day. So
one
you have to do academic reading to know history.
reason I do try to follow what seems interesting to me or what is captivating me is that ultimately I'm going to need to present this topic with that kind of like manic passion of someone who actually cares about what they're saying. And I think that that's easier to do if from the research stage you've been following what seems interesting.
Yeah.
Instead of like forcing yourself to sit through a bunch of stuff that you don't really care about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, changing up a little bit. So with your video essays, you've covered a wide variety of different topics, but with the exception of like a handful, like the J.K. Rowling example, most of your video essays tend to talk about one subject and then you move on from that subject. You don't tend to revisit them, or maybe you talk about them briefly or tangentially in future videos. Do you feel like there are any videos that
Oh my gosh, thank you for the $5. Thank you, thank you. $5. True. $5. True, true, true. I recognize this reference. Thank you.
that you've done where you've done a particularly strong or a particularly weaker job trying to communicate or persuade the audience of a certain idea or communicate a certain idea?
I think a lot of my like older videos, by which I mean like older than 4 years, like to my current standards, like they really don't hold up. Like I kind of like I never watch them. I just don't want to subject myself to that. But I just know that like I bet I wouldn't even agree with what I say in this video. Like in respect, in part because I do a lot more research now and stuff that I used to, and also like I think my perspective on some things has kind of shifted as a result of just more experience. So yeah, it is a little bit awkward, of course, because people. That's another strange thing about being online is that all of your work of the last 8 years or whatever, it's all available
It's all
to the
there.
audience at
Yes.
once as like this kind of grid. And whereas to you, like the stuff that's one or two pages down that grid, it's like I've forgotten about that years ago. You know what I mean? So it's weird. Sometimes people like want to talk to you or ask you about this content that you've like almost forgotten you made. I mean, not that extreme, but like do I remember like what I said, the details of what I said in the video from like 2018? Like no, I don't.
Sure.
Like nor do I necessarily
I
endorse
see.
what I said in that video. But it's another thing that can make, along with this like idea of an opportunity to be hated, it's another thing that makes you cautious because you sort of through experience gain this sense that everything you say will like haunt you for eternity, right? And you'll have to be accountable for it forever.
True.
And people will
I will
always
be accountable.
have it on record that you said XYZ, and you'll in 10 years you'll
I
need
do
to
like
explain why you
saying
said that
XYZ.
potentially. I mean that's probably not a healthy way to think about it because that you'll never set a single word to paper if you think that
some people need their XYZs to survive.
If you're thinking like that, so you have to kind of turn that anxiety off in order to actually create anything. But it's definitely an anxiety that's there. I don't think that really answers your question, but
well, I mean, like I definitely get the idea that you don't necessarily feel as good about like some of your older video essays because of the way that you've grown over the years because of like your development.
But they're still part of your development, so you shouldn't just reject them outright. I feel that's a mistake.
Research process and like the degree that you go in depth on certain topics. I guess that like to go to your point about like the kind of anxiety about committing something to paper because you're worried about what people are going to say in 10 years. I do wonder if, because I don't think that is generally healthy. I think that a big thing, this is a problem that I don't know. I hope that this is something that we and future generations become a little bit better about recognizing that like people who say some things, especially like the more time in between when someone says something and where they're currently at, is probably an indicator that either they don't mean that or that they've grown past it,
or maybe they can change. See, people can change. Sometimes people will hate you and love you. I mean, look at my relationship with Lucy. Sometimes I say she's awesome, but other times I try to cancel her.
whatever.
Jesus.
Like this idea of treating something that someone said in a video like 5 years ago as the same as something that, as the same thing, or assigning the same value to it as something that someone says today, is not a good. It just doesn't feel accurate. It doesn't feel like a healthy standard to hold to people. Because yeah, like otherwise, no one's going to ever feel comfortable saying anything. Like Twitter will just be like a dead website because no one's ever going to want to post anything, you know?
Unless they're trolls or people that try to stir things on purpose. Because that happens as well. So I guess it wouldn't be a dead page after all.
It's like, I do hope that people grow a little bit more on that. But then again, you know, like having at least a little bit of anxiety is probably good. Like, you know, you don't want edgy kids going online and making like racist jokes or whatever, because like if those come up in the future, then, you know, like things like that probably, you know, like there's a reasonable degree to ask.
Some people are not cautious enough.
Yes, exactly. Like it's good to be cautious, but probably not to the extent where we're like holding certain things that are relatively benign over people for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Right. Like I hope that there's like some kind of reasonable middle ground between these things, but I'm not sure if like we as a society have gotten to the point where we're like comfortable recognizing what that is yet. But I hope that we're able to get there. I guess like here to the original question of like, how do you feel about communicating certain ideas in your videos? One example I had in the back of my mind is like, when you used to do more dialectic videos. I know that you had like a regular repertoire of different characters that you would employ, and one of them was like Tabby or Tabitha, who was kind of like the stereotypical like leftist cat girl, Antifa, etc., etc. And my interpretation of that character was, I mean, not necessarily to be positive or negative. I interpreted it to be more kind of like a descriptive, like this is just how, like what this perspective is, right? But I saw a lot of people basically look at that and be like, oh yeah, I want to be just like Tabby. And I was like,
have you not been paying attention to my stream? Wow, Connor, wow.
I'm not sure if that's what's being communicated here. So I guess I'm interested in your perspective about like that kind of perspective, or like similar kinds of like takeaways that people might have had with your videos that weren't necessarily intended.
It's definitely the case with the dialogical videos that many more interpretations are possible, which also again puts you at the risk of people are more able to interpret it in a very uncharitable way. You know, part of the reason for those videos is like that it presents a way of exploring different sides of an issue, yes, but also like the kind of social dynamics of an argument itself and the way that like power and rhetoric kind of function in this actual situation.
Being a linguist.
Sure.
But yeah, it's not easy to, you know, when you're so afraid of being misunderstood or taken out of context, it's kind of difficult to produce like work that has like subtlety in it, because you sort of learn to fear subtlety.
It's okay. I don't worry
or at least
about
you fear ambiguity, right?
I don't worry about being taken out of context because I know how to communicate my ideas.
So I don't know, but that's what makes something art, is an ambiguity, right? Like otherwise it's, you know, it's political speech making, but like I feel like, and I think anything that rises to the level of art has an element of ambiguity and interpretation. And so, you know, if you want to make art, which you don't have to, right? I think most YouTube content probably doesn't rise to the level of art. I don't really even have an opinion.
Not all art needs ambiguity. I say this as an artist. There you go.
I don't know whether my own videos are art. I think some of them probably fit the category, some probably don't. But I think that if you want to make art, like, you do have to be at ease with misinterpretation, which is just like,
I don't think
it's just a fact of like how audiences will receive anything with ambiguity.
See, that's fascinating, because like whenever I look at art, and I've been trying to get better into it, and I'm not going to act like I have like a fancy background in it. This is strictly like a personal perspective, but I always like try to go in and understand, always try to get an idea of like what the artist is trying to communicate to me. So when you say that it's actually important that there is a degree of ambiguity in there, I guess like I don't know, that's just like different to me because it's like because with art it's
Yeah,
like
because art isn't just about guessing what the artist wanted. It's a communication, right? It goes both ways. So it's also about how the artwork affects you. You also communicate with the artist, you know? It's a communication. It's not like a one-way message from the artist. It goes both ways. That's why it's communication.
I feel like an artist is trying to evoke a certain idea
Sort of, but artist is not the only factor that matters in art. The receiver of the art equally matters.
or image or what have you when I look at
That's the
something or
thing.
when I'm experiencing something that is supposed to be artistic that couldn't
Art
be
is a
like as
two-way
clearly communicated with
communication,
like
not
a
just one way.
like a formal political speech or what have you. Yeah, I don't know. So I guess I'm interested in like how you see art.
Well, I think a lot of people have this approach to like interpreting art that I kind of call it like a puzzle box approach. Like their job is to like decode the message that the artist is trying to convey, right? So like I don't know, there's that viral tweet about like the Black Panther movie where someone was saying like, oh, at the end of the movie he should have faced the camera and said, "I'm the same kind of communist as you," right? But like I think that uh, you know if what someone is trying to say in a work of art is basically here's the kind of communist you should be.
Yeah, but it's if it has it in if the ambiguity is sort of inherently there, then you don't have to go out of your way to create it, if that makes sense. It's not a necessary it's not a necessity to go out of your way to create ambiguity, is what I'm saying.
Then you shouldn't make a movie or a play about that. You should just say that, right? That you should write a manifesto telling people what kind of communist to be. If you're putting characters in motion and a plot and a story with images and sound and you know you're saying something more than just a political message, right? You're trying to show people something about human feeling or like there's something there that's not reducible to like a political manifesto. And so trying to translate a work of art into a political manifesto is to take what is artistic about it out of it. Um, so I guess that's why I kind of dislike the puzzle box approach.
I mean, I can understand that. I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm not familiar with like a puzzle box approach. I guess that like when I think about art, like for example, music, right? Music is something that's easily accessible to everybody. Everyone is able to listen to music and be able to feel some sort of way. You know, it's one thing to listen to like a description of a war, just like a factual, like this is A, B, C, D, what's happening over there. It's another thing to hear like someone's music describing, like trying to convey the feeling that they had when they were over there, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like, oh, this is like trying to convey the same kind of information. Hopefully you can be able to read words, but sometimes reading words off of a page, like it takes some of the emotion that someone might be trying to convey out of it. So I just feel it like I guess I just see it as like another way of communicating information that maybe like an essay can't do justice to.
Well, if you take like a very broad view of information, then sure, you could say that all of this is just communicating information. But like, there's different kinds of information, right? There's like factual information, or there's kind of like argumentative, persuasive information where you're saying like this is what you should believe and what you should do, and then there's kind of experiential information, right? Which is a more ambiguous kind, right? Where you're kind of presenting a story, or you're presenting a situation, or you're presenting a kind of moment in thought or feeling like someone would in a song, right? And then that it's not to say that obviously some interpretations are more valid than others, right? Because in that they are more supported by the content of the art in question. But I think that if someone it would have to have like an example here. Well, people could disagree about a song, like how ironic it's meant to be, or about like whether is this bittersweet or bitter angry, or like you know what I mean. Like there's like subtleties like that I feel like are sort of inevitable disagreements.
So I guess, and to take this back to the conversation, maybe I can ask you directly, like, is there a canon interpretation of like any of the dialectic video essays that you've done? Like, is there a correct perspective, or is it more just like you're laying out descriptively how you understand these different perspectives to be and just letting them interact with each other?
No, there's not a correct perspective. I mean, well, in the sense that, like, okay, so take like a dialogic video. I've done like The Hunger, which is a video. Oh, it's about a lot of things. It's about like addiction. It's about religion. It's about the conventions of political debate being abused. Right.
Political
I think
debate.
that, again, some interpretations of that video are more valid than others.
Okay.
But if the video had like one clear message that I could just write a paragraph of text summarizing, then I would have just written a paragraph of text, right? I feel like the desire to make a video like that was to show something that could not be told as effectively otherwise, but also something that, because it's told in the kind of like dramatic format that I chose, I accept will be sort of open to some flexibility of interpretation, and some of those I will feel are more valid than others. But it's also kind of the nature of making art that you, as the creator, accept that you are putting something out into the world that now belongs to the audience, right? It's kind of, you, in order to create something like that, you're accepting that you no longer have the final word, in a sense.
Okay, interesting. Do you think that you're going to be bringing back more dialectics in the future? I feel like you've got, like, over the past couple of years, it seems like you've focused more on just like descriptive essays,
right,
where you're talking straight into the camera. But yeah, with The Hunger, I guess that's the most recent example. Do you think that you're going to be doing more of them in the future? Or like, where's your feeling at right now?
I expect that I will do another one at some point, but I think that in the medium term, my intention is mostly to focus on more straightforward essays.
Okay. Any particular reason why, or just like that's not what's calling to you?
I think it has to do with the fact that
maybe that's just faster to make.
Admire a lot of the content that I admire is in that more essayistic format at the moment. I feel like I sort of have lost like role
He's
models
a bad
who are
interviewer.
doing dialogic stuff on YouTube. I
Is she a bad interviewer? Am I a good interviewer? Would you call me a good interviewer? What is the difference between me as an interviewer and RGR as an interviewer?
Like, maybe this is being a little bit too, this is instigating drama. I don't know, but I feel like when I see other people do the dialogic format, I usually don't enjoy it. So that makes me want to do it less.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people, when they do it, isn't there like a meme where it's like, oh, you're doing a dialogic video, so you're gonna have like one perspective that's super reasonable, and then one that's like crazy out of the like just an unreasonable interpretation of the opposing argument.
That is kind of, I think, I mean, often it can be kind of a tedious way of doing things, right? Where it's like, well, look, if you have an opinion, just face the camera and say it, right?
Sure.
Instead of putting like a straw man character in. I mean, I feel like if I'm bothering to make a dialogic video, I certainly will have characters who like represent perspectives I don't agree with, but I try not to make them merely straw men there to be defeated.
Yeah.
In fact, often the point of it is to show how the weaker argument defeats the stronger, right? Which I think is something that I've often kind of tried to dramatize. Is the way that
I don't know. I'm biased.
I think it's like a reflection of my frustration with actual political debates, where you see how like frivolous hate or hateful nonsense.
I should have more political debates.
Can actually be very rhetorically.
ContraPoints would not survive the Yokotaro experience, but we will.
Successful.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, I really like because I think that's something that you do really well. And obviously, like, there's never going to be like a perfect representation of another opinion as like a sort of steel man. Like, otherwise you might as well just like put a person who actually has that perspective into the chair.
I mean, technically speaking, you very well could, if they agreed.
I think that, something that you do really well is, at least to the best of your ability, try to reasonably represent opposing perspectives, even if they're sometimes like really toxic. So I guess like one thing I'm interested in asking you about is like how you've generally dealt with that. Like, you've had characters and perspectives that are like transphobic or fascist or what have you. in order to be able to write those kind of characters, in order to be able to inhabit that sort of headspace, like it's really, I feel like that's a really big burden. But like, how have you sort of done that?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, you do kind of. There's kind of perverse fun to it to me. I think sometimes where it's like, okay, like what is it like to be this type of person, and like what is like the emotional core of like what's driving this person's viewpoint? Like I don't know. To me, that's there is like some level of like fun and like getting and trying to like sort of adopt another person's viewpoint and like understand this thing that seems like really perverse to me, but like understand it and attempt to understand it authentically. Like, okay, so I had a character in The Hunger called Virginia Lamb who's like an ex-gay evangelical.
Yeah.
And so like to do that, I mean, obviously I've like known such people in my life, so I'm like aware of
ex-gay
sort of what their deal is. But like I listened to a bunch of podcasts about like the founder of basically the founder of gay conversion therapy, who
God.
was himself ex-gay and who had sort of like some kind of traumatic experience in the community, and you sort of like come to understand like why this seemingly like crazy position like seems appealing to people. I spent a lot of time also like listening to like
how do you become ex-gay,
the testimonies of ex-gay people on who are now like promoting evangelical solutions to like the problem of sexual brokenness, as they call it, right?
The what?
And like I don't know
what the hell is sexual broken? I don't even want to.
Like obviously like it can be kind of emotionally difficult to spend time with this, but also I don't know, I feel like it's sort of, if you're writing a dramatic work, it's dramatically exciting because there's so much pathos to the situation that you want to capture like the emotion of these people, because it's sort of contradictory and conflicted and interesting, in short, right? It's psychologically interesting.
I don't think that most people would say it's interesting, but well, like I'm interested in hearing more about that.
Well, I think that I don't know. I think that there's always something so dramatically interesting about a person at war with himself. That to me is an interesting basis for a story.
Sure.
So
Inner
I think
conflict.
I kind of zero on that as like there's like a story here worth telling.
But see, like that's such a more interesting. We're gonna use this word to that. I mean, like that's a way more interesting way, I think, of looking at it, and I think I agree with that. Whereas, like, I think it's really easy to just kind of like take the basic, I don't know, like the basic Twitter position of like, oh, that kind of person, well, they're a shitty person, cancel them to the dirt, fuck them, like, and I mean, like, that's not to say that there's any endorsement or that it's.
I'm about to do a really low-level joke, so prepare yourselves. Well, if you're fucking them, then you don't really hate them, do you? See? I warned you. There was a literally low-level joke incoming.
Good to endorse from a moral or any other kind of position, like their positions, right? Or those kind of positions, right? But like, I think that there's a lot more, I guess, kind of like meat on those bones. Like, there's a lot more to unpack there, I think, that than people will give consideration to, which makes, playing that kind of character, I'm sure, more interesting.
Well, I think also part of it has to do with like there's like different ways to like judge people, and there's different ways to like evaluate the world.
I judge everybody
from a moral perspective. Like you can say that someone is being good or bad, or maybe they're ambiguous, and you can explore the ambiguities. Interesting is an aesthetic category, not a moral category, right? So I think so when you start like when I say that, like I don't know, I think like the psychology of like someone who is like an evangelical like ex homosexual or whatever, like I say that it's interesting. Like I think that there's like, I mean, some of the interest is like maybe intellectual curiosity of like how does a person like this come to exist, and how do they explain to themselves. But I think that there's like an aesthetic or artistic interest in like there's something sort of like compelling about this person's mind from a human perspective that like draws me in, right? And that's not based on an urge to like morally evaluate it. It's based on something more aesthetic than moral.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So once upon a time, you used to run a
Once
Discord
upon a-
server. It was like a ContraPoints official Discord server. You
I
did not
have a Discord server. I have an official Lucy has a Discord server, the Giggle Cord, the Pond, which actually, I will tell you a little bit of a trivia, was created by people, for me, they asked me if I want a Discord. It was created by old members of the RGR community. There you go. There's your trivia for today. They created the Discord for me. I started out as a mute streamer who did not even have a VTuber avatar.
not run that today. Something happened between then and now. So what's the story behind that?
Well, I don't know that I ever actually ran it. I mean, I think it was like an official ContraPoints Discord server, and I guess I was a mod. Although, being a mod is actually quite a lot of work, and I don't know that I was actually doing any of that work, so I'm not claiming credit for that. But at the time, I think I had like 20 or 30, at most like 50,000 followers. So,
Oh wow!
I mean, which is still like
Yeah.
sizable, but
Yeah.
it's this is just to give an indication that like this was not at a stage in my
I have 1,000 subscribers. 1,300 and something.
career where I had 1 million followers. I feel like to have a private, fan community that you're actively, directly engaged in at the point of 1 million followers is completely untenable and a very bad idea.
Yeah.
Because it starts to become like Colleen Ballinger having a group chat with her. You know what I mean? I mean, I think it would be a little different with me because my fans are mostly older than Colleen Ballinger's fans. I think my fans are overwhelmingly adults, for example. That's good. But I think that, even back then, like this wasn't a good idea. In part because of there's just a certain like power dynamic, and a lot of people, they form a parasocial attachment to you based on your videos, and then when you interact with them, you have this like kind of magnetism over them that gives you power, which is just it's too easy to
Magnetism?
almost inadvertently abuse it. It's just not a good idea.
Abuse it?
But yeah,
I don't know. It feels like really weird to hear, to be quite honest.
Why did this Discord stop existing? Well, it stopped existing because at the time, there was a lot of people were using this to discuss politics, but there would be increasingly frequent civil wars within the Discord about one issue or another, where I would then be asked to come in and essentially
People that say stuff like this just got tired of trying to do it and wasn't worth the trouble, I think. True.
adjudicate like what was allowed or what was the official ContraPoints Discord position on XYZ political issue.
I think the Giggle Cord is thriving. Positively thriving. Let's take a look what's happening in the Giggle Cord right now. Somebody posted my newest comic, which I'm pretty proud of, the comic, when I announced that I'm gonna be making more comics.
And I think the one that finally got out of hand to the point that I shut it down was, I believe the debate in question was, is it racist to be anti-Marxist, Leninist, Maoist? And I just decided, I'm out.
That is true. There are no toxic gigglers.
Like I'm not. I'd rather not have a Discord than have to answer this question.
Yeah.
Right. So I also think I kind of realized like this will only end badly for me if I continue to let this be an official Discord.
Sure.
So I think the Discord still exists. I don't know. I don't enter those spaces because they're fan spaces. Like it's not really for me. It's for them.
Sure.
And I think that I think it's called the unofficial. I hope it's called that. I think it's called the unofficial ContraPoints Discord or something like that. But yeah, it has moderators that have nothing to do with me. And
okay, you want discourse? I think placing yourself as the creator / celebrity. Okay, I'm gonna talk about weird dynamic now. Placing yourself as the creator, the higher person, and the rest of the people as quote unquote the fans is weird. There you go. That's my take. That's my hot take. They are the fans. It's for them. It's not for me. I think that's a bit weird, but
for me. So I think that's probably for the best. I can't really be held accountable for things that go on in that community because
like a viewer does not necessarily even have to be in the category of a fan. They might just be watching you because they're interested in the information that you have to convey and find it entertaining at the same time. It doesn't mean that they're like the fan, if you know what I mean.
I don't know what they are and I am not involved.
Hmm.
And I prefer to keep it that way.
Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. There's, yeah, I mean, like, I guess with Discord, I feel like it's hard because a big pull of utilizing Discord, at least from my perspective, right? Thinking about like how to be able to translate into like IRL political effective,
And yeah, RGR is definitely a lot more hands-on with the Discord. So I feel like RGR is gonna have a little bit of a different approach / view on the Discord topic.
advocacy, effectiveness, so on and so forth. It seems like it's important to have those kinds of personal relationships, and they usually are like best fostered on something like Discord with like live streams or what have you. But I feel like, especially when you get to such a large size with like a politically focused Discord, like what you were dealing with, it just seems like it's almost like an inevitability that you're going to have to constantly adjudicate those kind of issues or go to war with your community or get into arguments with people or whatever, like if you want that to be able to survive in the long run. Like I don't know.
I don't think you have to go to war with your community if you want it to survive in the long run. I don't think the war that RGR went on with her community in the past was necessary.
I guess I haven't
necessarily
heard of a really large Discord community that's politically focused, where either it hasn't been nuked, or the creator hasn't just like completely dissociated with it, like with what you did, or with someone like large streamers.
Oh, you nuked it, but I'm not sure if you were big.
Where they'll either like basically say like, these are the beliefs of this Discord. If you disagree with this, then you're out, and it becomes very echo chambery. Or they just are like constantly debating with people in there, and that's just like, it basically becomes like a full-time job managing it.
Yeah, I think any community online has to be moderated, and people often don't appreciate the work of moderation that goes into making like any given online community usable. Because without moderation
is important.
Everything's just 8kun, right?
Yeah.
Like unusable trash. Like, so I think that, I'm not saying respect the mods necessarily, but I mean, maybe a little bit respect the mods. Like, I admire the people who put a lot of like unpaid time into making online communities like functional.
It's hard.
And it's not easy. So I don't envy that position, no. You have to make a lot of like judgment calls that will make a lot of people mad, but it's just like, there just can't be no rules. People used to think this, right? I remember like a very common position people would adopt online is that like free speech would thrive if we just got rid of every single rule governing speech in every single situation, right? So like any kind of like regulation of what you can say in any community for any reason at all is seen as like sort of
censorship,
anti-free speech censorship.
There you go.
Well, I feel like we've kind of, most recently with Elon Musk taking over Twitter and turning it into X, there was initially this notion that this was going to be like the free speech platform. We've seen it so many times now that we know the exact progression of what happens when you attempt to do that. Right.
So the advertisers,
it ends up getting like overrun by extremists who end up like bullying out a lot of people.
The first thing that comes up is content that is illegal, right?
Yeah.
Which forces you to, actually, you do need to moderate this to some extent, or the government will shut the website down for posting, sexually explicit images of underage people, for example.
Sure.
Right. You do in fact need to do at least that level of moderation. But then, how much hate speech is allowed? How many Nazis do you want to have? Like, these are questions that you do start.
All the Nazis.
So yes, there do in fact need to be rules.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it's always just like, I feel like as someone moderating a community, it becomes like, it's one of those things where I feel like people look at it and they're like, oh, it should be like super easy. Just be reasonable. But everyone's idea of what reasonable is going to be different. Yes. And that's where the issue is.
Yeah, completely.
I moderate the community.
All right. So another thing I'm really interested in talking to you about is, I mean, like, you know, something that is in the backdrop of a lot of what you do, is the fact that you're one of the largest, not only women
I'm the largest Polish trans streamer.
content creators online in this political space, and not only one of the largest queer creators, but also like one of the largest, specifically like trans creators in this sort of online space. And at least when I was looking at the numbers, mind you, there's a lot of like large transgender content creators, but very few
But
of
none
them
of them are Polish.
that focus primarily or in large part on political subjects. The other two who are like super notable being Under the Desk News, who's non-binary, who's really popular on TikTok, and then Blair White.
Uh-oh.
Not great, but you know, those are the numbers. And so, you know, I guess I'm wondering like just what's your feelings about that? Like how has that affected your content? Yeah, like I don't know, like how does that factor into what you do?
Well, it's a complication. I mean, there's a lot of elements to it. One is that you're going to take like an increased level of heat from people who are going to hate you because you're a transgender.
Yeah,
it is very much a thing. Obviously, then there's another side to it, which is like this kind of mascot, like your kind of mascot role. Whereas now, okay, well, you're a famous trans person. There's not that many famous trans people, so you're now seen as like a representative, which comes with all kinds of like, pressures for you to. I mean, it's an impossible job, basically, right? Because every trans person wants you to exhibit transness in the way they feel represents them. And of course, that means a bunch of contradictory expectations are placed on you that no one could possibly meet.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to learn to be at peace with not meeting them and having a bunch of trans people mad at you all the time. And that's just, it is what it is. I think, you know, I used to get real worked up about it, but getting worked up about it and trying to defend yourself, it just makes the problem worse. So I feel like you kind of learn, again, a kind of minimalist like stoicism or something about it, where you sort of don't say too much, and you sort of the world doesn't need to hear every opinion you have about being trans.
True.
You actually, contrary to like what your first intuition may have been, you don't need to tweet every thought you have about LGBT experience or about anything for that matter. So
actually, I don't really talk much about the LGBT experience at all. Now that I think about it, do I talk about transness or LGBT much? Maybe I should talk about it more. It's the Pride Month. You do sometimes, not that much. I certainly don't talk much about my personal experience of being trans.
You know, I think there's some things that I keep to myself, and I'm just very at peace with that. And also, I accept that like there's going to be a contingent of trans people who will perpetually be very angry at me, and I've also basically made peace with that, and I don't try to fight it. Like it is what it is.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, like in regards to there's kind of like an issue, like issues that are specific to the trans community, but also like in respect to like being.
Why do you want to turn your stream woke? Maybe. Who knows? Maybe that'll give me the views. Being woke.
A member of
and then
a historically
leveling up from woke to woke scold
group, whether that's being a woman or being queer or anything like that. And in general, something that there's a really interesting conversation I remember having when I was in graduate school with a professor who his name is Eric Lupke, incredibly knowledgeable. He taught a really difficult class to teach on identity and intersectionalism in public policy and in politics, right? Rife for very difficult discussions and for controversy and so on and so forth. But I think that overall he did a good job with it. But
I'm a magnet
one
for
conversation I had with him that I disagreed with him on, where, you know, basically we had a conversation like, okay, how do you deal as someone who's a member of a historically marginalized community? How do you deal with issues that are relevant to that community if it's something that maybe you don't want to take out or stake a personal position on for whatever reason, right? Like, let's say that you're a woman legislator and there's some bill I won't get into a specific subject, but like, let's say there's some bill that's relevant to women's rights and you just, for whatever reason, don't want to take a position on it. Maybe you feel like, oh, I don't know enough about it, or, you know, for whatever reason you want to abstain, right? His argument was like, well, we should try to push for, or, and I want to be careful with how I say it because I also don't want to like misrepresent him. And I really respect him a lot. This is just something I intellectually disagree with him on. Basically, he said like, well, if you're acting in a leadership capacity, you should
This is no longer an interview. This is now a conversation, by the way.
feel the freedom to say, no, I'm not going to take a position on this. I don't think that this is something that I feel comfortable weighing in on. And I appreciate that. And I think that that's something that would be ideal to do. But practically speaking, I don't think that that's what we experience, right? If I were a legislator and someone were to approach me with a bill affecting trans people, right, or queer people in general, and I were to say like, oh, I'm just not going to take a position on it, people are going to be justifiably pretty pissed at me, you know, because like, even if I don't know as much about something, or even if I don't regularly talk about, you know, the specific policy that's in play, just because I'm a member of that group is going to put that expectation onto me that I stake out a personal position. And it's like, I don't know. I think that's one of like the bigger reasons why it's like earlier in my social media career and even in my professional career, I focused on like LGBT issues because like I kind of know that people are going to expect that from me to some extent, right? And
I don't actually focus on LGBT issues all that much in my content, do I? I don't think so. Maybe I should more.
And I don't know, like, I guess, like, I've come to make peace with it. I don't have, like, strong, like, positive or negative feelings about it, and I'm glad I'm able to make a positive contribution to the world about it, but it's not, you know, there's less of an element of choice in that, and I think that people think that there is.
I don't know.
I think that it's good to
Depends.
speak on these issues because you're right that you will be expected to. It's good to speak if you feel that you have something to say. But I guess that where I agree with your professor somewhat is that I do think it's like worth resisting the kind of like ghettoization of identity, where like if you're a transgender, people basically only care what you have to say if it's about being transgender.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, this is a thing that.
Well, this is where the magic of intersectionalism enters, and the fact that I'm Polish means that I can talk about Ukraine as well. Because I'm Eastern European. There we go. I'm not sure if there's anything to be happy about here, but you know.
Happens in right-wing politics like very starkly, where like, okay, so I think like maybe the most famous example in the 70s, Phyllis Schlafly wanted basically to be like a John Birch, like anti-communist, like foreign policy kind of person, but she kind of was ghettoized into this like women's issues role, which she was extremely effective at as a right-wing anti-feminist speaker.
Oh.
But it never materialized anything more than that, because as a right-wing woman, you know, she was seen as, oh, you're useful, you can represent, you know, the right-wing view on women's issues, but never anything beyond that. Unfortunately, I think it does happen on the left too, where if you are trans, like you kind of do get tokenized a little bit to being like, where people want you to talk about trans stuff, but then they become less interested to hear what you have to say about anything else.
Yeah.
And I do think that's like somewhat worth resisting.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, jumping around. So,
any more questions?
A couple of years ago, and I mentioned this to you a little bit ago, you did a speech at the XOXO conference.
Not that many minutes left, so we'll see.
Specifically talking about, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
By the way, all the interviews I've done so far have been 100% winged. I didn't have any questions prepared. I usually just wing it. And I build new question as I get answers, you know? As people answer, I just think of what questions I can build on, you know, based on what they answer.
Talking about etc. Your channel and your vision of it back then. That was back in 2018. And I think at that conference...
I'm not sure if it's good. I think I should prepare more, actually.
You said that the purpose of your channel or the thesis of it
But all the interviews that I've uploaded have been winged
is
on the
to be
spot.
a response to, at the time it was like online fascism, right? Or like on the online far right? That was what you're contradicting, the ContraPoints. But in more recent videos you've done, it doesn't seem like that's really been the focus. You've been focusing on more subjects, like you mentioned earlier, that are like more, where your passion is. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what would you say is like currently the thesis of your channel?
I don't know that there is a thesis beyond talking about things that I find interesting. Like, I think that
is a thesis.
When I first started the channel, there was a sort of more consistent pattern of like types of creator that I would be responding to, or like types of debates that I would be interested in contributing to. But I feel like part of me, part of like, what is good about getting sort of big enough to be independent is that I'm not necessarily tied to a particular culture war context. And I think I have built an audience that is interested in hearing what I have to say about almost anything, as long as I can make it interesting.
Sure.
So, to me, that is exciting. And it makes it more rewarding that I'm not stuck talking about just one type of thing.
I talk about all sorts of
doing
things.
A 3R video about
Most
the Twilight
of
Saga was definitely branching out.
Sure.
And definitely not something that you will expect from me, and probably not something that most people would think they would want from me. But it was something that I got interested in and felt I had something to say, and so I did it. And the video people watched the video, so yeah. I guess it works. Likewise with videos, like I did a video called Envy, about envy and its like manifestation in all kinds of like social and political contexts. I don't think anyone would have asked me to make a video about envy, right? If I had like a poll of topics I could cover and envy was a choice, I don't think that would have gotten a lot of votes.
I might have seen the
I had something to say about it, and
I might have seen that video.
So that's what I made the video about. So I think at this point that the topic is what I'm interested in right now. Obviously, I don't talk about everything I'm interested in, because I know that some stuff doesn't necessarily have a big audience that's interested. I mean, I as a hobby, I'm play classical piano music. I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I don't make videos about it because, I think that it's like it's a smaller niche of people that are interested in that, and also like I'm not necessarily such an expert in it that it like warrants me speaking to such a big audience about it. So
I mean, you could.
I guess
I
limit topics to what's interesting to me, what I think people want to or will or need to hear, and also what I think that I can be a reasonable spokesperson for the topic. Like if it's something that I feel like there's some topics that I don't necessarily want to touch just because I'm not a good voice for that topic.
For example.
Okay.
I like to think I'm aware of my limitations.
So like not like being conscious of like, okay, like this might be something interesting, but I might not have like the best experience, or I probably couldn't like develop the right experience to be able to like speak on something.
Right. I'm never like the experience of a black person in America is not a good topic for me.
True.
Yeah.
For reasons that
I'm not afraid.
I assume I need not state.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like if people call it staying in your lane, it's a bit cliche, but you know what I mean. Like there's topics where you are not necessarily the right person to be talking about it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I mean, like I do think that there's an element to where it's like, if there's a subject that's interesting and you could develop a good perspective for it, then that could be something worth pursuing.
To be fair, I avoid talking on topics that I don't know stuff about. I do say with Palestine, Israel, that I don't have big knowledge on it.
But
true,
yeah,
Drakengard.
Like I probably could never make a video titled, my experience as Asian person or something.
Yeah, I will talk. I mean, even as a white American,
I've been called the spiritual Vietnamese person. There you go. I've been given the pass. I've been given the pass to be the Asian person.
We'll talk about race, because if you're going to talk about American politics, it's somewhat.
by my Vietnamese friends. There you go. That means that I can make that video officially. I've been given the official seal of approval.
Unavoidable,
Yeah.
right? That you talk that race comes up, but I also know that I try to keep aware of like the fact that I represent a particular type of perspective on this topic that is not the only or final or even the most interesting or relevant necessarily perspective on it. You know, so there's a limitation there to
Sure.
like how far I can go with that.
Maybe.
That makes sense. So we've
Last
talked
question.
a decent bit about your channel, the kind
And
of
now we're gonna talk about my channel. No, just kidding. I hope it would go.
theory behind it, the way that you conduct yourself, and where you're at
I've
currently.
been told similar thing by my Vietnamese friends. What does this say about the Vietnamese? It means that Vietnamese people are open, warm, friendly, and welcoming.
We also talked about like advice for larger content creators and how they could use their platform, especially if they want to try to use it to influence and have a positive effect in IRL politics. I think that before you mentioned the possibility of like what advice you give to smaller people or to people just starting out and how they could be able to make an impact. So I think that makes the most sense to take this wrap up. So like for people who are starting out, who probably are just looking for any advice or any inspiration or any whatever, just so they could be able to make some kind of positive contribution to the world and use social media as a vehicle for doing that, what advice would you give them?
Well, I feel like it goes back to my central piece of advice, which is if you're going to speak, have something to say.
Mm-hmm.
So only you can know what that is, because you know what you care about, you know what you're interested in, you know what you're knowledgeable about, you know what is exciting to you, and therefore what you could make exciting to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So again, on some level, you have to like customize your topic and your channel and whatever creative thing you just, you know, whatever it is you're creating, you have to tailor it to your own personality and interests. So don't just try to imitate someone because someone else is
True.
talking about a certain topic. You're going to try talking
If
about
you're
it.
gonna imitate someone, imitate me.
Okay, but are you interested in that topic? Do you have anything to say about the topic? A good
No.
like test for whether
But God will I try.
you have something to say about something is, do you find yourself thinking about it a lot? Like just
Yes.
spontaneously. Are you in the shower? Are you driving? And are you like running through arguments and thoughts about this topic
Who
in your
has time
head?
to shower?
If you are, then it's a sign that you have something that you want to say about this, right? If you find that you have to force yourself to think about a topic, you might not be a good person to talk about
But
it
if you have to force yourself to think in general, what then?
because it's not interesting to you, right? And you don't sort of organically have anything to say about it. So I feel like when deciding what you want to focus on, it's you kind of do on some level have to follow your passion, your emotional interest. Like you can't. There's some things that can't be forced, and I feel like, you know, when choosing what you're going to make your YouTube channel about, that's definitely a thing that I would not force it.
Interesting.
That is true.
And I mean, like that makes a lot of sense, right?
I mean, it does. Yes.
Yeah. It's just like it's fascinating because I feel like a lot of people probably do begin from that kind of perspective. I think that most people who begin creating YouTube content or create some kind of social media content probably begin with the perspective of,
then
oh,
it
there's
becomes
something
logics inevitably
that I think is really important that I want to say. Maybe they don't have the right way of communicating it. Maybe it's, you know, a not great video and, you know, there's probably some element like, yeah, they have to work up, you know, their presentation skills, their speaking skills, their editing skills, right? Like there's a lot of soft skills that come with creating something that people want to watch. But
true.
From what you're saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the foundation that people can't get distracted from, even if there's a lot of incentives trying to push people away from it, you can't get distracted away from making something that fundamentally you really care about.
Well, because that's the one thing that matters above everything else. And anything else is sort of excusable if that's there, and nothing else will compensate for that if it isn't, right? So, I mean, like I could give like little pieces of like, you know, practical advice, like, oh, if you're starting out making content online, having good audio is more important than having good video because people will watch a grainy video if the sound quality is good, right? Whereas if a thing is barely audible and there's all this like, you know, noise on the track, like that becomes unpleasant for most people. Obvious stuff like that. I mean, you can just sort of do.
Unless you were making a silent movie.
I did not know anything about video production really when I started. Like, I had no background in that. I had no experience. I'd never been on a film set or anything. I had no experience video editing. Not really. No experience like doing lighting. All this stuff I kind of learned by practicing it and by looking up
Learn
YouTube
by
videos
doing.
on how to do it, and just through experience. So you can learn those things. But the one thing that you kind of can't force, the one thing you can't do just by
Passion.
learning is
of the
like
Christ.
choosing what your interest is. I feel like that's something that comes from inside of you, and no one else can tell you how to do it or what it is.
True.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know. It makes me feel good because I mean, like, I think if more people did kind of fundamentally focus on that, I feel like I would enjoy using social media a lot better. Not sure if I'll go as high to say like, oh, the world would be a better place, but like, a lot of my YouTube feed nowadays, I don't really pay as much attention to because I feel like a lot of it is just kind of like produced content, like sludge like pushed out of a vending machine or whatever just to be consumed. And it's like
it's a real problem.
Yeah.
Like I find that like there's definitely specific
We'll
creators who I
take
love
charge of your intake. Okay, take charge. Your feed is the result of what you watch, in a lot of ways.
reliably watch all their videos, but I would say that like the good stuff increasingly does feel like like a jewel in a pit of sludge.
Yeah.
Like so much content is basically being churned out. Like, I don't know, iceberg videos about X topic, and the script is clearly written by ChatGPT.
There's a lot of
and
good
read by someone who
content out
actually
there.
has no opinions about the thing they're talking about. Like you can tell.
Yeah.
And it's boring. It's really boring, and it's obvious that the person who made it like doesn't really care about this, and it's just like I guess we could do a video about that today. Like that,
Right.
that comes across, that's communicated. Whereas when someone is passionate and has put time into something and is talking about something that they know about and care about, like
How long has this marathon been so far? 7 hours. I think I deserve a reward for the 7-hour marathon. Or something.
it just shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of
Shows
sense.
like a show.
Yeah. You know what? I think that's probably a good point to leave it. Because like, it's a
Leave it.
really, yeah. So Natalie, thank you so much. It's been a very, very fun journey. Do you want to tell
Journey?
people, I mean, you're the larger content creator, but for people who might not happen to know, where can they find you on social media?
Well, you can find me on YouTube at ContraPoints, or on I'm calling it Twitter. On Twitter at ContraPoints, Patreon, Instagram. Someday I might make a TikTok, but I haven't gotten there yet.
I mean, like, it's fun, but like we'll see if it's still around in. Well, honestly, I'll probably be like a year or two.
I'll hold off on seeing if it's still legal before putting too many eggs in that
Legal.
basket.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for giving me something to react to. Oh, thank you for the $5. It's time. It is time. It is time indeed. How many patrons does RGR have? Daniel Jedrzejowski. Not a lot. Actually, not a lot. Less than me. Okay. Now's the time.